I still can't fucking believe it," Charlie murmured, a single tear traveling down his worn face. He was so pale, like all life had been drained from him. God, how I wish that was true. How I wished it was him they found dangling from the rope instead of her. "I know, bud," I said, patting his shoulder. "I'm so sorry." And I was sorry, but not for him. Never for him. The coffin was lowered down slowly. What was taking them so long? Just drop the fucking thing down there already. I bit my lip in frustration, a single drop of blood staining my white shirt. I just wanted everyone to be gone. Just wanted one last moment alone with Rose. I needed to say goodbye. Needed to say I was sorry. "You go ahead, bud," I said to Charlie after they finally got the thing down there, and all the crocodile tears had been spent, and the priest had told us it'd all be fine in the end, 'cause God loves us all, and it was all somehow a significant part of his grand plan. I know it's cliche and all, but what fucking piece of shit plan is that? God? The plan where you snuff out someone so good, so pure and true, and leave the rest of us to rot in the wake of her loss. No wonder people are abandoning you. You fucking lost it. He has, hasn't he? A cheery voice called from behind me. Charlie and the rest of the fake grief encounterage had left for the wake, and I was finally alone with Rose. I just needed the moment alone. Why was that so fucking hard to understand? Why couldn't the universe grant me just this one simple request? What? I asked, the somber pain in my trembling voice catching myself by surprise. I turned, expecting maybe the priest, or one of Charlie's dirtbag cousins, but instead found myself face to face with a tall and tan stranger, dressed in an immaculate white hoodie. The big guy, he grinned, pointing to the sky. He's lost it. He only had the one marble, you know, and he fumbled that one eons ago. His piercing emerald eyes burrowed into mine in ways I can't quite explain. There was something so wrong about his imposing presence. Like I knew he somehow wasn't meant for this place, for this world. Every fiber of my being wanted him gone, yet I was also drawn to him, to the godless energy he so effortlessly radiated. I murmured. Don't know. Sure you do, Evan, sure you do. He interrupted, an idle step forward sending shivers down my spine. You see it? Clear as sudden death. There is no balance anymore. No one around to keep those karmic numbers aligned. How do you know my, have we met before? He shook his head, taking another step forward, now glancing into the gaping wound in the earth. I felt like running, turning on the dime and bolting for my car. I've never really felt fear like that before, you know, instinctual, primal, but even though my system was overflowing with adrenaline, I couldn't move. I couldn't leave her. I had to say goodbye. Had to say how sorry I was. Imagine if the stranger started, the shape of his long blonde hair seemingly unaffected by the rain, of which was now pouring down relentlessly. Imagine if there was a way to get him to pay. Who? I asked. God? No. Evan. He chuckled heartily. That's above your pay grade, I'm afraid. Her husband, Charles. My fingers closed a fist at the mention of his name. I won't deny having considered it. Killing that abusive motherfucker. Beating him to an unrecognizable pulp. and then leaving him to die a slow, painful death. He knows, the man said, sauntering over to face me. I winced internally as our eyes locked once more, and after no longer than a second, I had to turn my gaze to the wet grass. He knows you two were, how shall I put it delicately, doing it. Shut up, I erupted, instinctively swinging at him. I could have sworn he was standing in front of me, and judging by the sound of his voice, he was. But when I looked up, he was nowhere to be seen. I can do it, you know. A soft voice whispered into my ear. I can make it right. Make it balanced. Shit, I said, staggering sideways in shock. All I need is your go-ahead, the man said, and I can make it happen. How? I yelled, a relentless grief tumor traveling up my esophagus. Oh, it's easy. I'll just pull the old switcheroo. Charlie takes her place in the coffin, and you get your Rose back. Happily ever after. No, I stammered incoherently. It's not possible. It's not right. Right? The man snarled, his violent glance flashing a vivid green. What's right about any of this, Evan? Charles beating Rose to an inch of her death? Her lying to you about it? How many doors did she clumsily walk into? Evan, did you count? But you knew. She didn't have to tell you. Yet you did nothing, did you? You watched her wither away, until she was no more, until there was no other way out. Was that right, Evan? Is that righteous? Don't, I murmured. Please don't. That's guilt you're feeling. Guilt and grief and anger and hate. Potent mix of powerful emotions, no doubt, but ultimately wasted if you don't use them. Evan. I fell to my knees, digging my face into the soaking wet grass. I'm, sorry, Rose. So sorry. I sobbed. How do I get her back? How can I make it right? Easiest thing in the world, the man grinned. A simple handshake will do the trick. And then? I asked. What is the cost? No cost, he said. I'm doing this for the balance, to one-up the big guy. You have my undying word. There was a dark sincerity in his voice, blasphemous, sure, profane and unholy, yes, but truthful, nevertheless. I stumbled to my feet, my once pristine rental suit now a muddied mess. I threw a longing glance into the depths of the grave. What did I have to lose? Nothing. A long tormented life of hollow nothing. It's a deal then, I muttered, extending my hand. Charlie for Rose. Splendid, he said, grabbing my hand in an instant. An overwhelming sensation of pain suddenly ran up my shoulder, like he'd ripped the fucking thing right out of the socket. Bring old Charles out here, and I shall see to it. Wait, I said, clutching my arm. I have to bring him here? You have to use it, Evan, he said, a gleeful smile stretching across his perfect face. Put some effort into it. I nodded weakly, letting the doormat hatred slowly overcome the crippling grief. Just bring him out here, that's all. Easy fucking peasy. I could do that. For her. For Rose. The walk from Rose's grave to the wake was the longest 5 minutes of my life. Every step felt like an eternity. A harrowing void of emotions attacking me from all angles. Tears flowing. Fists closing and opening in seizure-like movements. Fingernails digging into skin. teeth clenching together so hard I half expected them to crack and explode and fly out of my mouth in jagged shards. And then technically a terrible, all-consuming calm. "Charlie," I said, walking up behind him. He was surrounded by aunts and uncles and unknown and insignificant faces, every one of them offering platitudes and fake salt, flat voices disguising as concern. If I could, I'd drag every last one of them with me, but I just needed Charlie. "Evan," Charlie said, smiling briefly, before realizing he shouldn't be doing that, then hiding it just as quickly behind the unaffected plainness of a psychopath's mask. "What happened? You look like a mess." "I need a word," I murmured, sweat dripping down my brow, the strange intervals of my breathing threatening to expose everything. "There's someone, desecrating the grave. I need your help fucking them up." "What?" he exclaimed, his true face showing for just a brief second. "Who?" "Don't know, bud," I said truthfully. "Will you help me?" "You fucking know it," he snarled. "Let's fucking go." Charlie didn't hesitate. It wasn't in his nature. All impulse, no thought. He'd been like that since I first met him in middle school. I just wish I'd noticed the signs earlier. Maybe then we wouldn't be in this mess. Bursting out of the door, Charlie soon picked up pace, running across the road into the graveyard, never once slowing down. I struggled to keep up, but at the same time, I kind of hoped I couldn't. Maybe it'd be all over before I got there, but it wasn't, of course. That was never his intention after all. "Is this the guy?" Charlie yelled, pacing back and forth aggressively in front of the man in the white hoodie. The man didn't flinch though, just stood there idly, hands in pockets, a vicious grin plastered on his face. "It is," the man said. "I am indeed the guy." I was out of breath, struggling to stay on my feet, watching from a distance as Charlie charged at the man, swinging fists around drunkenly, but never once landing a single hit. "Here we go, Evan," the man chuckled. "Let us set things right." He swiftly raised a hand and snapped his fingers. That was it. That was all it took. No lightning from above, no proof of smoke, no infernal ring of fire, just a barely audible snap of his fingers, and Charlie was gone, and Rose appeared. "Here she is, Evan," the man laughed. "As promised, the old switcheroo." I scrambled to my feet and ran to her, swooping her up in my arms in a tight embrace. Her skin felt so good against mine. It's a terrible thing to say, but it did. Cold and smooth, like a porcelain doll. She was so beautiful, you know, even in death. She was the most beautiful woman I'd ever laid my eyes upon. "I'm sorry," I whispered into her rotting ears. "I'm so sorry." "Happily ever after," the man said cheerily. I dropped her dead body to the ground, overcome then by every dark emotion known to man. Hatred, fury, grief, guilt. And just when I thought I couldn't take any more, when the soothing comfort of the darkness crept in, the man, now whistling a merry tune, walked up to me, resting an impossible cold hand on my shoulder. "Do you hear that?" he said, looking up to the sky. And I did. I heard it, clear as sudden death. I heard Charlie's desperate shrieks from down below, fists and feet banging on the coffin lid relentlessly. "That's the sound of choice," the man said. "That's your punishment, Evan, and your reward." The man gave me a solid pat on the back, and then, with a wink and a smile, he was gone. Just like that. Poof. I sat there for minutes, staring at the lifeless body of Rose, at the swirling clouds above, at the yawning chasm below, and then I grabbed the shovel. I got the first text on a Monday night. I'd fallen asleep watching some random show I didn't really care about, that I really only had on for background noise so I could fall asleep, when my phone suddenly dinged with a text message. Grimacing, I fumbled around on the sofa until I found my phone and unlocked the screen. "Do you see me?" I stared at the text. My groggy brain caught between annoyance and mild interest. The number wasn't someone I had in my contacts or recognized, so I figured it was either a mistext or a scam. Normally, I would have just deleted it, but I was just sleepy enough to not be thinking entirely straight. Instead of ignoring the message or erasing it, I typed a one-word response. "Nope." I didn't think about the message until I looked at my phone the next morning. Brushing my teeth, I rolled my eyes at how dumb I'd been. I was probably on the radar of some phishing dick now, and I could look forward to getting bombarded with more messages until I blocked all their numbers. But maybe it really had just been an honest mistake. Somebody meeting a friend that hit a 7 when they meant to hit a 4. Hopefully they found who they were looking for and left me out of it. I was leaving a meeting that afternoon when my phone buzzed in my pocket. "Do you see me?" Anger flushed my face as I stabbed the delete icon on the screen. Fuckers. I knew it'd be something like that. Stuffing my phone back in my pocket, I went back to my office. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. "Do you see me?" Cursing under my breath, I pulled up the menu to block the number and then deleted the message again. 5 minutes later, I got a new text with the same question. I couldn't say for sure if it was from the same number or not, but either way, I was getting pissed off. "No, I don't see you. Leave me alone or I'm going to report you to the authorities." I wasn't sure who the authorities were in this case. These texts could be coming from a computer halfway around the world for all I knew, or it could be some creeper down the hall. Either way, I hoped my hollow threat would be the end of it. I didn't get any other messages that afternoon or on the way home, though the thought of it preoccupied me most of the time. I kept checking my phone at every phantom buzz, and when I went into the store to pick up a few things, I found myself paying closer attention to everyone around me. The couple of times I saw someone looking in my direction, I felt a small thrill of fear before reminding myself that I was being stupid. It was just a scam or a prank. That was all. Stuff like that happens to people all the time nowadays. "Do you see me?" I'd left my phone in the bedroom when I got home, forcing myself to not check it until I got ready for bed. When I picked it up and saw the new text, I had to fight the urge to throw it against the wall. No, I was letting it get to me too much. Just block the number again, and keep blocking it. If that didn't work after a couple of more days, I'd call the phone company. 3 days later, I called them. After an hour on the phone, they claimed they couldn't find any record of the now 20 harassing text messages I'd claimed to receive, nor any request to block numbers from me in the past 30 days. When I asked if they were calling me a liar, the guy just laughed and said no. Told me that maybe my phone had gotten hacked somehow, but that for further help, I'd need to bring it into a store location. He was still rambling from his script when I hung up. Just then, my phone buzzed. "Do you see me?" I did throw my phone now, feeling some satisfaction as I heard it crunch against the far wall of the living room and watched it bounce off behind the sofa. I was done with that phone and that carrier. Fuck them. I'd go get a new phone tomorrow and start fresh. The idea of a clean slate with a new number and phone calmed me. And as I calmed down, I started feeling guilty for throwing the phone in the first place. I could have gotten my old stuff off of it and sold the phone to help pay for the new one. Now it might be busted to hell, and it looked like I left a big mark on the wallpaper. It was overly busy with birds and flowers, and I thought of replacing it since buying the house 2 years earlier. But I still didn't need to be losing my breath caught as I saw motion on the far wall, 2 feet up and a few feet over from where I'd scuffed the wallpaper. I saw something shining from within the dark red breast of a swooping pheasant. 2 somethings actually, heart thudding. I stood up and stepped forward for a closer look. It was a pair of eyes, staring out at me from behind the wall. Glistening with tears, the eyes met mine with a kind of desperate pleading as my phone buzzed again. "Do you see me?" I was shaking as I met the eyes again and gave a small nod. The floor creaked behind me, and then a rag was on my face as I was pulled backward to the floor. No, I had to get away. I had to find a way to... I woke up in a cocoon. My body trapped in a tight-fitting sheath of foam that allowed just enough room to breathe in and out through my nose. My mouth was sealed tight with something, and I didn't have enough space to even try to force my mouth open to breathe or scream. It felt like I was in a standing position, body supported by some soundproof prison, and posed with my right arm positioned upward so my hand was just within peripheral vision, so I could see the cell phone that had been glued there. The phone screen was very dim, but it was still visible in the dark. Only 2 icons appeared on the screen. One said text, the other said journal. I hit the journal button first. "Welcome to journal. Here you can record your thoughts or account. It will be periodically saved to the cloud, and the phone is wired to stay charged. So no need to worry that your work will be lost. Feel free to use this feature at your leisure while you are able." Tears began to form at the corner of my eyes as I reread the message. Who was doing this? What were they going to do to me? Where was I? As though in response to the last question, a flare of light suddenly bloomed in my vision. I slowly began to make out what I was seeing through a small pair of holes in the front of my face. I hadn't even known they were there in the dark, but now I could make out it was someone's living room. As I watched, a young woman came in from the left with a drink in her hand, settling down onto the sofa to watch television as I stared at her pleadingly. She didn't notice me, didn't seem to notice that anything was wrong at all. I tried to squeal through my sealed lips, tried to thrash in my foam coffin, but it did no good. I was soundproofed too well, with even the eye holes having some kind of plastic lenses to prevent any noises from escaping. All I could do was stare at her, willing her to look in my direction, begging her to notice. The phone. Shifting my eyes back to its screen, I hit the back button and went to text. Welcome to text. A variable refresh timer is in place to prevent unsightly text spamming, but otherwise, enjoy. Maybe I could call 911 or Mike but no. The text screen only had one option. One message to be sent to a fixed contact that I couldn't change. Sobbing, I hit send. Out in the living room, the girl's phone buzzed. Picking it up, she studied the screen a moment before setting it back down with a frown. I didn't blame her. I knew what she'd seen. A message sent from a person she didn't know and a phone she didn't recognize. The same phone that was stuck in my hand. Just a single line of text that meant nothing to her and everything to me. Do you see me? The doorbell rang at 11:13 p.m. like a punch to the gut of the house. It was either somebody in trouble or somebody who needed to be taught some manners, I figured. I set down my nightcap and went to check the door. I couldn't see anybody through the window in the door, so I opened it up. There was nobody there. I took a few steps outside into the night and looked around. There was nobody there. I heard something crinkle under my foot and looked down to see an envelope there. I bent down and picked it up. I opened the envelope and there inside were some Polaroid pictures of my 4-year-old daughter sleeping in her room. In one of them, she was wearing the new doctor pajamas that I had helped her get into earlier that night. In others, she was wearing different pajamas. The photos looked like they'd been taken from outside, through the window of my daughter's second-story room. I dropped the pictures onto my front steps as my tired mind worked out what exactly I was seeing, and panic exploded in all over my nerves. I scooped up the pictures again and jumped inside, closing the door behind me and slamming the deadbolt home. Then, I rushed up the stairs to check on Ashlyn. She was snoring softly. I went over to her window and looked out. There was an extension ladder leaning against the side of the house, right next to the window. I double-checked that the window was locked, then left Ashlyn's room and went to check on my wife. Sasha was also snoring, sprawled out on the bed asleep. I hurried downstairs to the kitchen where my cell phone was charging. There was a notification from a text message from an unknown number. It read, "I've jammed your signal and cut your cables. There's no way out. There's only me. And soon, I'll be inside. Mr. Knight." I closed out the message and dialed 911. I strained to listen as the blood pumped and swirled around my head, but I didn't hear anything. And then I did hear something. The sound of glass shattering upstairs, where my wife and kid were sleeping. I yanked my phone off the charger and ran upstairs. "Honey?" My wife called from our bedroom. I rushed in. "What are you doing? Why are you making so much noise? You woke me up." I knocked over my water. I turned on the light and saw a broken water glass on the floor next to Sasha's nightstand. "There's somebody here," I said, as calmly as I could. "Look." I tossed the Polaroids onto the bed. Then I pulled the text message back up on my phone and tossed that on there too. Sasha blinked the sleep out of her eyes and looked at the first pictures, then the text message. Then she looked up at me with frightened eyes. "Is this real?" she asked. "It is." She was out of bed in a second, rushing past me. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Our child," she said. "What are you doing?" We both ran into Ashlyn's room where she was still sleeping, oblivious to any kind of danger. "There's a ladder outside," I whispered. "That's how we got up and took the photos." "You've tried 911?" Sasha asked, walking over to the window. I saw her look out and frown, her face dimly lit in the moonlight. "There's no ladder here." "Yes," I said. "He's jammed the cell signal somehow." Then I looked out the window myself. The ladder was gone, and there was a ladder here. He must have moved it. I heard more glass shattering from our bedroom, followed by a loud thump. I looked desperately around Ashlyn's room for a weapon, cursing myself for not grabbing a knife from the kitchen, and cursing myself even harder for not owning a gun. What do we do? I heard heavy footsteps getting closer. He was in the hall between Ashlyn's room and the stairwell. We were trapped. My mind screamed in animal fear as I ran over and locked the door to the room. "We have to jump out the window," said Sasha. "I'll go first. Then you drop Ashlyn down to me. Then you come." Before I could respond, Sasha had already flung the window open and was halfway out. "Now," she said, as the slow footsteps thunked their way closer. Then she was gone from sight. I didn't think about what I was doing. I scooped Ashlyn from her bed. She mumbled something as she started to wake up. I carried her to the window and looked down. Sasha was standing down there, reaching her arms up. "Do it," she screamed. I dropped my child out the window. I watched her fall into the night, helplessly. From a distance I could easily kill her if she hit the ground the wrong way. I heard her scream in terror as she fell. Then Sasha had Ashlyn in her arms. The footsteps stopped right outside of the door and the doorknob started to rattle. I jumped out the window. As I landed on the grass, an explosion of pain shot up my leg. "Get to the car," I screamed to my family. I heard a loud crash come from above and looked up. A moment later, I saw a head emerge from the window and look down. The head was covered in a black ski mask, then it was gone from sight. I hobbled behind my family around the house to the driveway. There was a spare key under the car in a magnetic box, and by the time I turned the corner, Sasha was already reaching around for it with one hand, while the other arm was wrapped around Ashlyn, who was wailing in horror and confusion. When I got close enough, I saw that all the tires were deflated. Sasha pulled the box out and slipped the lid off. She unlocked the doors and got in the back seat with Ashlyn just as I finally reached the car. I got in the driver's seat and reached back for the keys. As I put them in the ignition, I looked up to see the front door of our house open. A man was standing there dressed in all black, holding a massive axe. I started the car and backed out of the parking spot as the man took a step forward. The car thumped up and down as it rode on 4 flat tires. I got it turned around and started heading up our long dirt driveway. I tossed my phone back to Sasha. "Keep trying 911. I shouted over Ashlyn's cries. "Now Ashlyn, I know that this is very scary, but everything's going to be okay. You have to be very quiet now because Mama has to make a phone call, okay?" Ashlyn quieted down to a whimper. In the rearview mirror, I saw her helpless face soaked in tears. Sasha was able to get through to 911. Just as we came to a massive tree that was lying down across our driveway, I heard her explain the situation with amazing calm as I broke down in total fear. I got out of the car, walked over to the tree, and tried mindlessly to push it out of the way. It was no good. Even with the 3 of us pushing, it would be no good. I heard the gravel crunch from somewhere off behind me. I got back into the car and drove straight into the tree, but that was no good either. The car had no traction. I heard the wheels grind as they tried to spin under the weight of the car. Sasha was still on the phone with the 911 operator. Help was on the way, but not fast enough. "Stay here and keep the doors locked," I said. "Where are you going, Daddy?" asked Ashlyn. "Please don't leave." "I'll be right back," I said, popping the trunk. "I promise, kiddo. Hey, I love you." Then I got out of the car and rooted around the trunk for the tire wrench. The footsteps were getting closer. They were almost right on us. I found the wrench and spun around. The man was standing a few feet away now, holding the axe. "The police are coming," I told him. "I'm not worried about it," said the man. "I'm Mr. Knight. I have a way of disappearing before the pigs arrive to root around." "What do you want?" I asked. "Anything you want, just leave." "Well, I'll tell you the situation I'm in," said Mr. Knight. "I've recently found the perfect wife, devoted to me in every way. I thought that would make me happy, and it has. But something's missing from our family, and with the world the way it is these days, well, It's just too cruel to bring another child into it. So I'm going to take the one that's already here. The one that's in the car right there. And then I'll be on my way. Mr. Knight took a step toward the car. I swung the wrench wildly and missed. Then I felt something hard hit my head, and then I was out. I woke up on the dirt to the glare of flashing blue lights reaching up to the heavens. I lifted my head up and saw that one of my rear doors to the car was open. The glass in the window had been shattered. A cop was standing there, looking inside the car. I pushed myself up. "Don't move," said another cop. I looked over and saw that he was pointing the gun at me. "That's my family in there," I shouted. "Are they okay?" I took a pained step forward. "Sir, this is your last warning. Do not move." "Please," I said, tears starting to form in my eyes. "Please tell me if they're okay. My kid, Ashlyn, is she okay?" The cop who was looking in the car turned and studied me for a moment. He took a deep breath and then spoke. "Your child isn't here." Mr. Knight didn't leave traceable evidence beyond some generic boot prints, an extension ladder which was stolen from my nearest neighbor weeks ago, and my description of him as being an average height and build. An extensive search of the woods around my house turned up nothing. It's like he disappeared into the night. Please, he has my daughter. If anybody knows anything about someone calling himself Mr. Knight, please let me know. I'm really at the end of my rope here. No, check that. I was at the end of my rope weeks ago. Now I'm sort of clinging onto the side of the cliff by one bloody fingernail. I didn't even know that you could get banned from calling 911. 31 calls over 36 nights later, and now I know the truth. They told me that unless they find an actual emergency situation, the next time they respond, they'll arrest me on the spot and haul me off to jail. And you know what? Honestly, that doesn't sound like a bad idea right now. Except for the part where I'd probably lose my children. Like I said, this started 36 nights ago. My ex-husband had the kids for the weekend, and I was looking forward to just relaxing by myself with some red wine and something dumb on Netflix. I was in the kitchen pouring out the wine when I looked out the window and thought I saw something there in my yard. A person. It was dark out, so I rushed over to the light switch and flipped it up. The outside light turned on and flooded the yard. Nothing there. I shrugged it off and sat down on my couch, scrolling through my Netflix options. Then the front door started rattling. That got my attention. After a while, the rattling stopped, but I sat there, frozen for several minutes. Then the doorbell rang. That sounded like a dagger into the silence. I spilled some wine. It's probably Alan. Probably just forgot something for the kids and forgot that I changed the lock. I sighed and got up to check the door through the peephole. Somebody was there alright, but it wasn't Alan. At least, I didn't think so. It was a man dressed all in black, including a black ski mask. As I was watching him, he reached down and grabbed the doorknob and started rattling the door again. That was when I made my first 911 call. I have seen that man every night since. The only reason I've made 31 911 calls instead of 36 is that for 4 of the nights, the cops were parked right outside of where I was staying. When I saw him, I only needed to flick the lights 4 times, and that would signal the cops. And while I saw that man for 36 nights in a row, the cops saw him 0 times. Not after I installed the camera pointing at my backyard. Not after I installed the cameras all around the outside of the house. Not after I installed the cameras inside the house. They never saw him, but I did. Every night, sometimes hiding in the shadows, sometimes standing inches away from me, breathing heavily. I will tell you about one night so you can understand how terrified I am. This was definitely the worst night in isolation, but the longer this goes on, the more every night becomes worse than the last. This was a bit over a week into it, maybe 10 days. I started off feeling some guarded relief. The cameras were all installed around the house, and the cops were parked outside. When this creep showed up, they'd get him. Or if not, then at least the cameras would prove that he existed, and maybe offer up some clues to his identity. I put the kids to bed and let myself have a bit of wine to help relieve the lingering terror. By the time I was ready for bed, I felt fairly relaxed and confident that I was safe for the first time since this thing started. I was ready for a good night's sleep, and I passed out pretty much as soon as I settled into bed. Sometime in the night, I was awakened by the creak of the floorboards by the foot of my bed. For half a second, I was confused with half a hangover haze. Then I understood. Somebody was in the room with me. I had a gun in the room, but I kept it in a lockbox at the top of my closet where the kids couldn't reach it. It was useless to me just then. How the hell did he get past the cops? I wondered, as another foot landed on the floor with a soft thud. Mommy? My heart almost exploded with relief. It was my 4-year-old kid, Alex. Come on, I said, sitting up and patting the bed. On most nights, he still ended up in there with me. Mommy, there's a man in my room, and he wants to see you. I bolted out of bed. Stay here, I said, running to the closet for the gun. He's nice, said Alex. He gave us candy. Oh God, Shane is still in there. My hand gripped the gun in the box, wavering. Did I want to bring a loaded gun in a room with a 6-year-old kid? I didn't know the answer, but I pulled the gun out anyway and ran down the hall, after closing Alex in my room. When I got there, the man was sitting on the bed with Shane. Shane was eating a candy bar, smiling. Mom, he said, Mr. Knight is awesome. How come you never told us about him? The man was holding a knife up behind Shane's back. I kept the gun behind my own back. What do you want? I asked. Then I heard the man speak for the first time. He kept changing his voice, modulating in an exaggerated way so that it was really high-pitched, then really low, now fast and smooth, now slow and stuttering. I want what any man wants, he said. I want your devotion and your gun. Hand it over, or the boy goes night-night for a long, long time. The hand holding the gun was slick with sweat, and my stomach was in knots as my heart pounded away in primal terror. You have a gun, Mom? And if I do give it to you, then what? I asked the man. Then I'll leave, for now. No sense of causing a ruckus with those officers down there if I don't have to. He lifted the knife an inch higher. And no sense of you causing a ruckus either, is there? I handed him the gun. Good call, he said. He lowered the knife, then turned to Shane. Hey bud, Mr. Knight has to get going now. Lots of other kids to give candy to. You be a good boy and we'll meet again soon. Yeah? I'll be good, said Shane. The man stood up and walked over to the open window. I swear I locked that window. He stepped out onto the garage roof as I grabbed Shane and yanked him back into my room. I flicked my lights on and off 4 times. By the time the cops got inside and upstairs, the man was long gone. That was the last night that I spent with my kids. I see them during the day, but never at night. The man does not seem interested in them. only in me. I can't for the life of me think of who the man might be. Somebody I know? I'll admit, I did turn my thoughts towards Alan, my ex-husband. We had some nasty fights before and after the divorce, but would he really hold a knife above his own child's back? I didn't think so, but I tested it one night. The kids stayed with my mother, and Alan stayed with me in the kids' room. I knew it wasn't him, because at 1 a.m., I woke up to the man throwing acorns at my window. He was there in the driveway, somehow always just out of the camera's view. Alan was snoring away in Shane's bed. I've racked my brain trying to think of who it could be. It just doesn't make sense. None of it does. It's just a nightmare without reason. How is he there every night and always gone without a trace by the time the cops get there? How is it possible? It doesn't matter where I am. At my house, at my mother's house, at this hotel. He always finds me. He always lets me see him. And he always disappears back into the night. Sometimes, I wonder if I really am imagining it. Shane and Alex both say they remember Mr. Knight, but maybe I put that thought in their head. That's what the cops think. That's why they've issued a written warning to me about calling 911 again. And it's what Alan thinks. He's starting to talk about full custody, at least until I get better. Sometimes, the man leaves me notes, but they are always printed out. And the cops think that I'm the one who prints them out. They even found a Word doc on my computer with one of the notes. And now I'm holding the latest note, which he slipped under my hotel door as I was writing this. It says, "Tonight's the night. I don't know what to do. If I call the cops and he's not there, I'll get arrested and probably lose custody of my kids. And if I don't call the cops and he is going to do something tonight, he's here." I will tell you my story. It's not very long. It started a week ago. I don't know why or how. I didn't upset some witch, and I didn't go skinny dipping in a pool of nuclear waste or anything like that. Sometimes, terrible things happen without reason. And this is one of them. I shot awake at 12:42 a.m. with the urgent need to urinate. I waddled into the bathroom, pulled out my package, and just stood there. Nothing came out. "Come on, buddy," I muttered to my member. "What's the deal? Thought you had to do some business here." No response. I gave it a little shake. "Come on now, don't have all night. Big meeting in the morning. Gotta get some sleep." I was about ready to put it away and chug a glass of water when I felt a sharp stabbing pain in my inner thigh. It made me hunch over, and I smacked my forehead on the toilet lid. "Fuck," I muttered, straightening out. I dropped my boxers in order to inspect what was going on down there. I thought maybe a pimple had burst or something like that. Gross. But not as gross as what I saw. Something was poking around under my skin. It looked like it was a crawling worm, twisting away just beneath the surface. "Nope," I said. "Just a little sleep deprivation. There's not really something moving inside of me." As if to prove me wrong, my flesh started stretching, like something inside was pushing it further and further outward. This event was accompanied by a flash of burning and unforgiving pain. I screamed and bucked all the way to the ground, arching my back like the letter C. My wife Jess called out from the bedroom a moment later. "Honey, everything okay in there? I told you not to eat the chili after you left it out all night." My daughter Allie joined in from her room. "Papa, you shouldn't have eaten that chili." "I'm okay," I lied. Go back to sleep, girls." Then, as in the eye of a storm, everything settled down. I still felt like I had to pee, but the weird movement had stopped, but only for a moment. And the following moment brought with it a torrent of misery and horror unlike anything I had ever known. A fleshy knob burst from the inside of my thigh with a gush of pink slime. I had two thoughts in quick succession. First, it's a dick. Then, no, it's a nightmare. This isn't happening. As my mind was turning things over, my mouth was screaming again. I don't know how long that went on, but eventually, Jess was banging at the door. "Henry, are you okay? Henry!" "Get a knife," I wailed. "Cut it off. Oh God, kill it, please." "I'm coming in," warned Jess. "No," I cried, but it was too late. She had opened the door, taken one look at the scene before her, and covered her mouth in shock. "I don't know what's happening," I sobbed. Then a jet of yellow fluid shot from the head of the thing, and I could no longer pretend that it wasn't a second penis. The physical release of the urine felt supremely satisfying, and for a split second, I felt actually content, until I felt the warmth of my own piss pool around my knees. "Is that?" started Jess. Yes, I said. "I don't know where it came from. Oh God, I'm a monster." "What do we do? Call 911? "No, it's too embarrassing, and I'm so tired. I just want to go to sleep and deal with it in the morning." I got cleaned up and settled back into bed. I was actually able to sleep for a little bit. I think because of all the adrenaline burst wore me out. I had nightmares of dicks sprouting out all over my body. One coming out of my chest, one coming out of my forehead, dripping in brain, but I was able to sleep. In the morning, it was gone. Even though it would have been hard to miss, I still spent several minutes searching all the folds down there for some sign of it. "Where did it go?" asked Jess. "I don't know," I said, "but you did see it, right? That wasn't just some nightmare, right?" "Not unless two people can have the same nightmare." "Can they?" I wondered. "I guess it's possible. No less strange than another cock poking out of your thigh for the night and then disappearing, if you think about it." "True," I said thoughtfully. "Maybe it crawled off somewhere. Maybe it was some kind of alien monster that only took form of a cock." "Maybe," said Jess. "You better get moving. You're going to be late for your meeting." I did get ready, and I'll tell you this, I felt great. It felt great not having a random second penis flopping around on my body. It was one of the best feelings in the world. But that night, it came back. The second night was no picnic either, but nothing will ever be as terrifying to me as the first night. And I'll tell you the rest of this story. It's not so bad. After it was accepted that this was going to keep happening every night, it's not so bad at all. There's a saying that I consider one of the wisest among sayings. It goes like this: happy wife, happy life. And well, let me put it like this: I have a very happy wife. My parents never played music around the house, except on Saturday nights. I'd be upstairs in bed, allegedly asleep, when it would start up around midnight. I could only make out a vague, muffled beat over which people were screaming incoherently. Come Sunday morning, I would find 2 empty wine glasses sitting next to the record player in which a Beatles album always sat. The record changed each week, though Help, seemed to have been my parents' favorite and got a heavier rotation than the others. I had no interest in the Beatles myself. My Walkman always had a cassette by somebody like New Kids on the Block or Boys II Men in it, stuff other kids my age were listening to. I had heard a bit of heavy metal from one of the older kids and didn't care for it much. All that senseless screaming. That's what I thought the Beatles were, because that's what they sounded like to me on those Saturday nights. But on one of those nights, there was a bad storm and the power cut out as the music was playing. The red light on my alarm clock blinked off, and so did the music coming from the stereo system downstairs. But the screaming didn't stop, not right away. It went on independently of the music for a few seconds until I heard somebody. My father, it sounded like, shout out something that sounded an awful lot like, "Shut up." Then everything was eerily quiet, except the wind howling outside and the patter of rain being driven against the house. I turned off my Game Boy and crept over to my bedroom door, where I stood listening. I thought that maybe I could hear some faint scuffling coming from below, but it was hard to tell for sure. I used to get scared at night, which was part of the reason I liked to stay up secretly playing Game Boy until it was a struggle to keep my eyes open. That way, I didn't have to think about vampires creeping down the hallway and peeking in on me. But standing there with my ear to the door in total darkness, without even the background hum of electrical devices to give me comfort, I felt positively terrified. It's nothing, I tried to tell myself. Just mom and dad singing along to the record for a few seconds after it turned off. Just go to sleep. It took me a couple of minutes, but I convinced myself that nothing weird was going on, and started shuffling back to the bed. That's when I heard a sharp, unmistakable cry. "Help! Somebody help!" It was too much for me. I let out my own cry. "Mom! Dad! What's happening?" From below, there were the faint sounds of things being knocked over, followed shortly by my mother's voice, barely audible. "Alex." I heard distant footsteps running up a flight of stairs, but they weren't the stairs just outside my bedroom. They were further away than that. The basement? Yes, the basement. I heard that door open, and the footsteps turn the corner and start up the stairs leading to the second floor. Not knowing who or what to expect, I peed in my pajamas. An instant later, my door flew open. I couldn't see who it was, and jumped into my bed, pulling the covers over my head. "Alex," said my mother, breathing heavily. "What are you still doing up, honey?" I pulled the blanket back and peered out into the darkness. I still couldn't see anything. I couldn't sleep. What's happening? Did I hear somebody call for help? My mother laughed. "That was just your father, doing his best John Lennon impersonation. Go to sleep, sweetie." She walked over and kissed me on the forehead. I could feel the heat pouring off of her. It was like standing next to the wood stove. A moment later, I heard another set of footsteps making their way up the 2 flights of stairs leading to my room. When they arrived, my father entered. "Everything okay in here, kiddo?" he asked. "Alex was just having some trouble sleeping," said my mom, "but he's okay now. Right, Alex? You're going to be a good boy and go to sleep." "Yes," I said. "Good boy," said my father. Then my parents left me in the darkness, soaked in my own piss, and still terrified out of my mind. In the morning, I walked past the record player on the way to the breakfast table. Revolver was sitting inside, not, as I had hoped, help. If it had been help, the notion that I heard my father singing, rather than somebody actually calling out for help, would have been a lot easier to swallow. Sitting down to a plate of pancakes, I noticed that there was a new padlock on the basement door. Why is the basement locked?" I asked. "Oh, your father was down there last night, messing with the boiler, and noticed that there's some mold starting to grow. That's dangerous stuff. No going down there until we can get it cleaned up. Okay, honey?" "Okay," I said, cutting a pancake into chunks with my fork. I wasn't hungry at all. I shuffled it all around while my mother busied herself at the sink. "Mom?" I said. "Yes, honey?" "What happened last night? I swear I heard somebody calling for help." My mother laughed without turning around. No, just your father's attempts at singing. I'm sorry if we were a little too loud and woke you up." We didn't say anything else to each other after that, including the drive to school, but as I was getting out, she said, "It was just your father singing. Have a good day, sweetie." When I got home that afternoon, the padlock was off the basement door. I wondered how long it took to clean the mold. Decided I had no idea. Then went up to my room to play Nintendo. After that, my parents started hiring a sitter every Saturday night and left me there with her while they went out. On the first night, I asked the sitter if we could play the Beatles record. I expected her to say something like, "No, that stuff isn't appropriate for kids." But she just shrugged and put it on. That's when I learned that the Beatles weren't a heavy metal band. Maybe they had one or two songs that leaned in that direction, but nothing like the sounds I was used to hearing from below. That night, the Game Boy didn't do the trick. The vampires crept into my thoughts, and I couldn't ignore them. They were just outside my door. I knew, waiting for their moment to come in and suck my life force out. And when I pictured them, they looked just like my mother and father. In the morning, with the sun rising up in the sky, I dismissed my fears as childish. They were my parents. They were adults. Whatever they were doing, it was adult stuff. There was all kinds of stuff that was like that. Paying bills, having sex, which I imagine at the time to mean just lying on top of each other, and I didn't see the appeal. It was stuff that I didn't understand and had no real interest in understanding. They were my parents, and they loved me. They told me so every day. I didn't like that I was the kid and had to do what they said, but I ultimately trusted that they knew what was best. And as fussy as I got sometimes, I accepted that. People want to know what it was like growing up with murderers, with parents who kidnapped and intermittently tortured 4 people before they were caught, until there was nothing left to torture, without ever asking for any ransom, just brutality, seemingly for the sake of brutality. I tell them it was probably pretty normal, except I thought that the Beatles were a heavy metal band. A few months ago, my 5-year-old daughter was in a sassy mood and started breaking shit. After several of my sternest warnings, I sent her to her room for timeout. I heard her fuming in there. "I have to get rid of Daddy," she told one of her dolls. "But how?" And I smiled, thinking that was pretty cute, in a way. I knew we'd be snuggled up together in no time. But what she's been up to these last few days, not cute at all. I'm a single father with my finances stretched to the breaking point. I don't have health insurance. I've been having to dress my wounds myself, and I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm starting to ooze with infection. Ever since school closed down in mid-March, I've been working from home while also watching my daughter. There's been nowhere else for her to go. I do my best as a parent, but have you ever tried to work out a line complex, esoteric code on a deadline? While a 5-year-old girl says, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, look, Daddy, look," over and over again until you look only to see that she's dipped a Barbie doll head first in an admixture of purple sparkles and McDonald's pancake syrup and smeared it all over the couch. There are 2 types of people in this world. Those, like me, who have experienced just that, and those who sip on lemonade while writing articles about how excessive screen time is bad for children. At least, that's how I always used to think about it. I'll admit, I've been having second thoughts lately. That's all to say that, over the past several months, my daughter has been watching a shitload of YouTube videos. I'm not totally negligent though. I had all the parental controls activated and all that. Plus I'd take the child outside, to the park or whatever, whenever I could. But sure, she watched a lot of videos, and I admit that I wasn't always on top of what she was watching. I didn't feel the need to review every toy review, or hijinks video, or cartoon that she clicked on. Sometimes I'd catch a snippet of something a little objectionable and would tell her to watch something else. After huffing about it a bit, she would. But Kill Daddy is a different story. God, I wish she never watched that fucking video. It was a Friday, and I was having an unusual productive day. As soon as I realized how much work I'd gotten done, I knew something was wrong. I looked around the living room and saw that Kylie was nowhere in sight. I stood up and walked down the hall. Her bedroom door was closed and it was awfully quiet in there, which meant, without a doubt, that she was doing something she wasn't supposed to. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. "Come on, kiddo. You know you're not supposed to lock the door." I reminded myself, probably for the 60th time, to replace that doorknob with one that didn't lock, in case I ever needed to get in there during an emergency. "Go away," said Kylie. I had visions of walls covered in pen scribbles, of headless dolls, of water overflowing from her bathroom sink. "Open the door now." My daughter didn't dignify my command with so much as a scoff. "Alright," I said. "I'm going to get the screwdriver. And if I have to use that screwdriver, you're going to be in big trouble." I waited a beat, hoping that the threat would be enough for her to open the door. But it wasn't. I sighed, got the screwdriver, and spent 10 minutes messing around with the knob, cursing quietly, before I finally got it unlocked. I threw the door open with a dramatic flourish, putting on my best angry dad face. My efforts were wasted. Kylie didn't even look up. She was sitting on her bed, watching a video. I felt foolish for a moment. That's all she was doing? Watching a video? But then, why'd she lock the door? I walked over and snatched my phone from her hands. There, on the screen, was somebody dressed up in a giant baby outfit, complete with diapers and pacifier, stabbing another man with a massive knife again and again and again. The act looked sickening real. A pool of blood was forming on the floor where the man, who was clearly already dead, lay. Every now and then, the screen would flash red, and on top of it all, in a growl so low it took me a moment to realize what was being said. "Kill Daddy. Kill Daddy. Kill Daddy." "Give it back," said Kylie, in a flat, demanding tone. I've always tried not to swear in front of my daughter, but this was one of those times where it came out anyway. What the fuck is that? Give it back. You are not allowed to watch stuff like this. You know that. Give it back now. Not only am I not giving it back, but you're not going to watch any videos all weekend. I knew that meant she'd be on my case all the time until the punishment was over. But, man, that video, it was still playing. Kill Daddy. Kill Daddy. Kill Daddy. I slammed my finger on the power button and turned off the phone. Meanwhile, I continued. You are to stay in your room for 1 hour and think about what happens when you don't follow the rules. I started to walk out the room. Kill Daddy, she said. I slammed the door shut on my way out. I went straight to the fridge for a beer. I needed it to calm my nerves and settle my stomach. After I chugged an entire can down, I turned my phone back on, intending to report the video as inappropriate. But I saw that somebody had beaten me to the punch, and the video had already been removed. That wasn't enough. As far as I was concerned, I took a screenshot of the URL and started typing out an angry email. I didn't know who I was going to send it to. No actual humans at YouTube would ever look at it, and even if they did, I didn't know what else they could do, besides shut down the channel, which has already happened. The FBI? That sounded right to me. This was some FBI level shit. The man had looked dead, for real. I was deep into the email, so I didn't hear Kylie open her door, and I didn't hear her creeping up behind me. The first I was aware of her presence was after she had jammed a pair of scissors into the back of my leg. Then I howled out in surprise at the sudden pain and turned to face my assailant. The sight of my daughter standing there, glaring at me with a stone-cold face, made me feel several things at once. Shock, anger, horror, and betrayal. But those all melted together into something more tender when Kylie fell to her knees and started bawling. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she wailed. "I didn't want to. The video told me to. I'm sorry I watched it, and I'm sorry I hurt you." I took the rest of the day off, and we went out for ice cream together. I'd never seen Kylie so upset, and I was no longer angry at her in the least. I was angry at whatever monster had made that video and uploaded it to YouTube. Kylie said that she hadn't even clicked on it or anything. It'd come up on autoplay after a Peppa Pig video. By the end of the day, we were both exhausted, but I was feeling like things could go back to normal. Maybe I'd had to shell out for a couple of therapy sessions for her to hash out what she'd seen with a professional. Or maybe not. At bedtime, she seemed more or less back to her old self. "Daddy, can I sleep with you tonight?" Even that wasn't unusual, since she has to sleep with me every night. While most of the time I made her go into her own room, sometimes we'd do a sleepover, and if anything warranted a sleepover, it was that fucking video. "Sure thing, kiddo." I read to her from the most wholesome, gushy books we had, until she fell asleep. I laid there for a long time, fuming about the video, working myself into a frenzy. I imagined finding the guy who made it and beating the shit out of him. Finally, I wore myself out and went to sleep, around midnight. About an hour later, I was awakened as my daughter tore out a chunk of my neck with her teeth. Try to kill me twice, shame on you. Try to kill me 3 times. By the next afternoon, I had once again convinced myself that things were back to normal. Kylie said that she had been having a nightmare and didn't even know that she attacked me until my screams woke her up. We spent the morning playing Legos and laughing. She was very affectionate and kept apologizing for attacking me twice. I told her not to worry about it. Just don't do it again. In the afternoon, I decided to get caught up on the work I'd missed the day before. I got into the groove, but also made sure I'd check up on Kylie more than usual. A few hours into my work, Kylie announced that she was hungry. "Pasta in the fridge," I said. "That okay?" "Yeah." I heard Kylie open the fridge, but she didn't close it right away. "Bottom shelf, I think, sweetie," I said, half turning my head. An instant later, a jar of pickles went hurling past my nose with incredible speed and shattered against the wall, spraying pickle juice and shards of glass all over me. "Kill Daddy," my daughter screamed, holding up a steak knife and running in my direction. That was when her attempts to kill me really began in earnest. I know I've been a little flippant while writing this, but that's just a coping mechanism. At least according to my ex-wife. The truth is that I'm scared shitless. I'm typing with 9 fingers right now. Kylie hid the 10th one somewhere. The wound on my neck is starting to turn green. I've hardly had time to think. I've been busy putting out fires metaphorically, but also literal fires, set by my daughter, in her effort to kill me. I've got her secured in her room, for now. The door is held fast by 4 padlocks that I found in the garage, plus 6 2x4s that I screwed across the jamb as extra security. She's not happy about it at all, but I think she's finally run out of things to smash, and she's bound to lose her voice at some point. She's been yelling, "Kill Daddy, kill Daddy," for hours and hours. Maybe once her voice gives way, and it's finally quiet, I'll be able to figure out what to do. I haven't slept very much in the past few days, so my mind is a little slow. Especially with those old painkillers I found sitting on top of it. Do I call 911 on my own daughter? Will they believe that a 5-year-old is capable of multiple premeditated murder attempts? What will they do to her if they do believe me? Am I better off calling a priest? Please help. I pulled the mask over my face and crept up the stairs, my excitement mounting with each creaky step. I felt the heat of my own breath, unable to fully escape through the mouth slit. When I got to the top, I cracked open the basement door and peered into the living room through 2 round eye holes. She wasn't there, but I knew where she was. I could hear tap water running. She was in the kitchen. I slipped off my shoes and walked slowly, carefully across the hardwood floor. The rush of running water grew louder, and then I heard the sound of someone talking. Did she have visitors? I took a few more quiet steps. No, she was listening to a podcast over the speakers. I stuck my head around the corner, and there she was at the sink, her back towards me, her long brunette hair pulled up into a bun. I took a deep breath. It was hot in there, under that heavy mask, but I couldn't take it off, not until it was done. It was time. I moved quickly until I was right behind her. I reached out and grabbed her shoulder. She snapped her head around, and as she got a look at me, I smiled behind the mask to see her eyes go wide in fear. I was prepared to end it there, but she screamed and brought a knee up, right into my balls. Oof. As I was hunched over, she gave me a shove and I crashed into the island behind me. I slumped to the ground in agony and looked in real fear as she twirled around, grabbing a knife from the sink and raising it up. "Hold on," I groaned, pulling my mask off. "It's me." When she saw me, she froze, the giant knife still up in the air. I could tell that my wife was not very impressed. "What the fuck are you doing?" she asked, Where the fuck did you get that creepy mask? I coughed, still holding my hand up in the air in a plea for mercy. Down in the basement, I think it was Dad's, I said. I was just trying to give you a little scare, for fun. Jesus, Bill, said Debbie. I was ready to kill you, and honestly, I'm still not quite decided on that. There's not a jury in America that would convict me, not after they saw that creepy-ass mask. Put the knife down, honey, I said. She threw the knife back into the sink and bent down. I was still crumpled in pain on the floor. Let me see that, she said, picking up the mask and then examining it. I guessed that it was made of stone. It was perfectly round, with 2 round eye holes at levels just different enough to cause a sense of unease. There was, as mentioned, a slit for a mouth. A row of sharp teeth was etched above and below the mouth, and then another row on top of those. It's heavy, said Debbie, and looks ancient. Do you think your father found this on one of his expeditions? Yeah, I said, starting to recover a little. It was in a stash box down in the basement, along with a knife that looked like it was made of bone. I was gonna bring the knife up with me, but now I'm glad I didn't. We should get it assessed, said Debbie, running her fingers over the mask. Could be worth something. I'm sure it is. Getting to my feet on wobbly legs, but I was hoping we could keep it, at least for a while, as a memento of Dad. I mean, if we ever need money, then yeah, we'll look into selling it, but we don't need money right now, not after the inheritance, and, well, I just still miss him, you know? Plus it's a cool mask, isn't it? A good conversation starter. She handed me the mask back. It's creepy. It scared the shit out of me. She sighed. If you want to hang it up somewhere, it's gotta go in your study. Someplace where I don't have to look at it. It was Roger Wentworth's retirement party. Old Roger had been my father's friend since they both started teaching at the college where I now taught. They spent many evenings sipping on scotch at my father's house, where I now lived. So when he finally announced his retirement, it only felt right to host the party. Derek Nielsen was in attendance. He was about my age and also taught at the college. It turned out that we actually grew up in that same town, a few years apart. While my life had been pretty much easy street since day one, born to a well-off professor and following in his footsteps, Derek's had been anything but. He came from a working-class family and had lost his father at a young age. He never talked about it, but I knew that his childhood had been rough. Yet, he had clawed himself out of a life of misery to find success in the academic world. Most of the other professors at the college were the same as me, born and bred in a buttermilk world of soft pillows and fancy cars. Derek stood out to me, and we became fast friends. On the evening of Roger's party, as soon as I saw Derek walk in, I excused myself from the conversation that I was having. I went to the fridge, got 2 beers, and found Derek. Come on, I said. I want to show you something. You'll appreciate this. Derek took the beer and popped off the cap with a lighter. Sure thing, bud, he said. I led him to my study. I found this mask in a box of the old man's stuff. Check it out. I pointed up to the mask hanging from the wall. The bone knife was mounted just below it. Derek dropped his beer on the floor and went white. Is this some kind of sick fucking joke? He demanded. What? What do you mean a joke? The look of fear on Derek's face made me start to feel scared. It can't be the mask, can it? It's unsettling, but it's not terrifying like that. I need to sit down, said Derek. Sure, bud, I said, wheeling my desk chair over to him. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to scare you. I thought you'd get a kick out of it, that's all. Derek looked at me with intensity. Tell me right now if this is a joke. I never told you about this, but maybe you found out anyway. I don't know what you mean, I said. I need a drink. Sure. Beer? Something hard, said Derek, now staring at the mask in bewilderment. I'll be right back. I stepped over the spilled beer and headed over to the liquor cabinet. Debbie was there, talking to somebody. I was starting to feel a little dizzy and things were blurring together. Where did you go off to? Asked Debbie. I showed Derek the mask, I said. It, didn't go well. I poured out a tall scotch. We should really get rid of that thing. It's creepy. I gave a vacant nod and went back to my study. Derek was still there, transfixed by the mask. I handed him the scotch and he looked at me with a start. He downed it in one gulp and then began. 35 years ago, my father committed suicide. Oh, I said, looking down at my shoes. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I don't tell people that. And I definitely don't tell them what happened after that. Look, can you just bring the bottle in? I was glad to get out of the room for a moment. Things had gotten intense in there. I needed to know why Derek was having such an extreme reaction to the mask. And he was my friend, so I wanted to support him. I just didn't know if I was capable of hearing whatever he was going to say. I needed the bottle as much as him. Or so I thought at the time, and I was right. I grabbed the bottle from the liquor cabinet and went directly back to Derek. I handed it to him, and he took a good swallow. The coroner ruled my father's death a suicide. Open and shut, he said. No need to waste money on the autopsy. But my mother had different ideas. Do you know where my mother is now, Bill? No, I said. She's in the place where they pad the rooms and scribble in coloring books all day. I took a drink and passed the bottle back. Shit, Derek, I'm sorry. Derek laughed. It was a strange laugh, devoid of humor or any emotion at all. She said that it was a man in a mask that did it. She said she came in to find the man in the mask holding the bone knife, watching my father bleed out in the bathtub. She passed out, and he was gone when she woke up. I looked at Derek in shock. What are you saying here? Derek took 2 swallows from the bottle. I'm saying I've seen the mask before. My mother's drawn it 1,000 times. The round face, the round eyes, the doubled teeth. That knife too, the bone knife. I heard the words that he was saying, but I couldn't process them. Now you're the one fucking with me, I said at last. I gotta admit, for a minute there, you had me. Now come on and pass that bottle over. I'm calling the police, said Derek. Then he did. I remember when my parents had the basement redone. I was 10 years old. It was an old house, so the foundation used to be set on boulders with a dirt floor. It started to fail, so they spent a lot of money to have it all reinforced with concrete. A thick slab was poured on the floor. The bodies weren't difficult to find. The initials had been etched into the wet concrete, and when the floor was broken apart under police orders, each victim was resting right under his or her initials. 11 bodies in all, and those were the only ones in the basement. It's not clear how many there were, like Derek's father, that never made it down there. All of a sudden, my father's late nights at the office when I was a kid started to make sense. We recently moved out of the house, and it's on the market. Nobody will buy it. I don't blame them. Derek won't return my calls. I don't blame him. I never did anything wrong, but my father did things that were very wrong, and I am his son. I wish I never found that mask. For the past few months, I've been writing horror stories for an online community called Insomnia Acts. It's been the time of my life, really, up until this morning. Now I wish I never found the place. There are so many incredible writers on there, just constantly putting out amazing stories. I never thought that anyone would pay attention to my stories when there were all these other awesome ones out there. But I started to post anyway, because I liked writing, and thought it was amazing when even 5 or 10 people read my stories and liked them too. Then 5 to 10 slowly grew to 50 to 100, then to 500 to 1,000, and all of a sudden, I had a following of sorts. The readers at Insomnia Acts are amazing. The comments on my stories are often better than the story itself, and it's always awesome to open up a private message from someone telling me that they enjoy my stuff. User 69digbutt69 was the first comment on one of my stories. The story was about a guy who keeps getting his fingers cut off and can't figure out who's doing it. At the same time, there's a new hot dog stand that opens up down the street that sells little mini hot dogs that are crunchy on one end. The guy ends up eating all of his own fingers on a bun. Good shit, wrote Dickbutt. My heart swelled when I read that. Somebody thought that my shit was good. I clicked the like button next to the comment. I wanted to reply by thanking Dickbutt, but Insomnia X is sort of a role-playing thing where everyone's got to stay in character in the comments. So I messaged him instead. Thank you so much for the comment. I wrote, I'm so glad you enjoyed my story. Smiley face. Dickbutt responded in half a second. No prob, dude. Keep writing that good shit. Lots of bad shit here these days. That also made me smile. My next story was about a toilet monster. This one got a few different comments, including another one from Dickbutt. Oh shit, now I'm afraid to shit. LOL. Love this. As soon as I read that, a notification popped up on my phone. 69digbutt69 is following you now. I couldn't believe it. I had a follower. Somebody liked my stories so much that they actually wanted to be notified when one of them came out. I kept banging out the stories, and one by one, I got more followers. But Dickbutt was already there, commenting on every single post. For the most part, the comments were all about how great the story was. But as I wrote more and started to try out new things, Dickbutt's comments would sometimes grow lukewarm. On one story, about a space expedition that ends up going back in time to kill off the dinosaurs, Dickbutt remarked, "Meh, not your best. You can do better." Honestly, I kinda agreed with him. It wasn't my best, but I was still glad I wrote it because it was something new for me. The real problem started when I posted my most successful story to date. A ghost has been stealing my toothbrush every night, and now I know why. It was called. It turns out the ghost was actually the narrator's dead mother and was stealing his toothbrush to get him out of the house to get a new one just when a meteor was due to come down and smash the house to flaming pieces. It was my first attempt at a heartwarming story, rather than my usual shit monsters killing everyone, and it was a runaway hit. The comments and messages started flooding in immediately. "This is so sweet and sad," wrote DogNabbit666. "Aw, reminds me of my own mom," wrote Lighting Lily of Death. up and down and all around, sent a private message. Your latest story is incredible. You have a real talent. Please never stop writing. Then I got the notification 69dickbutt69 has commented on your story. I clicked it right away. I couldn't wait to see what my original follower thought of the story. This really sucks. What happened? I'll admit, that stung, but only for a minute. The positive comments kept pouring in. Please, 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 write a follow-up to this. Sequel? Need more. When's the next part coming out? Would love to hear more about you and your ghost mom. Please update when you can. Honestly, I got a little dizzy. By then, I was used to some amount of attention, but this story was getting thousands and thousands of likes. This needs to be a movie, like Yesterday wrote, I will kill you twice. The next day, I decided to write out a sequel. People keep trying to run me over, but my ghost mom keeps saving me and doing my laundry. This one blew up even harder than the other one. People were going back and reading the first part. Greatest story I've ever read here, wrote Fuzzy Guts. I sat back and watched the reactions roll in. Was the story really that good? Or was this some kind of weird fluke? Then I got the notification. Dickbutt had something to say about it. Fuck, you turned this dog shit into a series? 30 seconds later, I got the message in my inbox. You fucking sellout. Writing the heartwarming bullshit. What happened to crunchy hot dogs and toilet monsters, dude? That's why I read your shit. Keep up this shit, and I might have to unfollow your ass. But 69dickbutt69 didn't unfollow me, even after I posted the third part to my series. My ghost mom got a ghost boyfriend, and together they protect me. That one ended up being the all-time most popular story on Insomnia X, and Dickbutt didn't like it one bit. Ghost Mom Sucked My Dick, part 315. How long is this miserable shit gonna go on before you finally write something good? That's what he commented on the post itself, but it wasn't the end of it. The private message followed right behind. Dude, I went back and reread all of your stories. You're such a great writer, but you betrayed me. I thought that was a bit over the top, but I replied anyway. Hey man, sorry you didn't like this one. Not everyone will like every story. I like to try new things, so I figure some of it will probably suck. But thanks as always for reading. You did it for fame, you fucking whore. Your story got popular and you couldn't get enough. But those people don't know you like I know you. I felt like he was close to crossing a line here, if he hadn't already crossed it. I considered ignoring him, but figured I owed him another response, since he was my original fan. Again, I like to switch it up, so if you don't like this one, don't worry. I'll probably do something like a toilet monster again soon. Haha. So the series is over? Nah man, I'll probably do a couple more parts. It's got a lot of momentum. It should have never been a fucking series. Did you even mean it to be a fucking series? Or did you just see all the teenage girls swooning and so you pulled part 2, which is even worse than part 1, out of your ass? And now you're telling me there's more horseshit parts coming? I decided not to respond to that one. Dickbutt seemed worked up to a genuine rage, and I didn't want to exacerbate the situation. But after about 10 minutes, I got another message from him. Well, then another 5 minutes later, Nathaniel. What the fuck, I thought. How does he know my name? Nathaniel, I want you to listen to me. There is going to be one more part in your series. I want a toilet monster to eat the ghost mom. Do that and we're good. I wish I'd just done it like he asked. 2 weeks and 4,000 new followers later, I was just waking up when I got a new alert on my phone. New message from 69dickbutt69. I sighed. I thought I was done with that guy. He had finally stopped messaging me after part 9 of my Ghost Mom series. I clicked on the notification and read the message. Gave you a chance, dude. I've been reading you now, part 13. A fucking angel comes down and brings Ghost Mom back? Are you fucking kidding me? That's not horror. That's fucking Disney Channel shit. And it wasn't even supposed to be a series. You didn't tag it as a series, did you? So then don't make it a series. Write something good. Now. Write something good like the one you did where the guy drinks a cup of soup out of the skull of his own twin brother. Do it now or I'll torch your daughter. Don't believe me? Look out your fucking window. I blinked hard at my phone and shook my head. Amy? I called out. Amy, are you awake, kiddo? No answer. I walked down to her room and looked in. Nobody there. Then I opened the curtain and looked out. There on the back lawn was a man holding the metallic cylinder of what looked like a flamethrower to my daughter's head. When he saw me looking out, he held up his phone and waved it around. I looked down at my own. New message from 69dickbutt69. One whiff of the cops and I'll send little Amy up in flames. Now write the fucking story and it better be good. I'm typing this up not so much because I think it will do any good, but because I want it to look like I'm doing something. Fuck. I have the worst writer's block of my life. I've been in the Ghost Mom zone for so long, I don't know if I can switch gears like that. What the fuck am I going to do? A rubber ducky that bites somebody's dick off? Oh god. No, that's horrible. Anyway, where would I even start with that one? A man that gets squid tentacles grafted on? Oh shit. Isn't that just that comic book? Maybe Dickbutt won't notice. No. Can't take that chance. Not with Amy's life on the line. It's gotta be original, and it's gotta be good. How about a man that gives birth to a stork? Is that good? Oh god, I am such a hack. It started innocently enough. I was reading on the bed while my boyfriend Charlie was playing on the computer with his friends. I don't play many games, so it's interesting to listen to the things he says to his friends, even if terminology goes over my head sometimes. There will be moments when I'll be focusing on something, and he'll just spout off words that sound extraterrestrial. I'll just laugh it off and continue with what I was doing. It wasn't my thing, but he enjoyed it, and it wasn't hurting anyone, initially. Like I said, I had my nose between the pages, reading about various armchair philosophies, as Charlie raved on in the background playing Call of Duty, I think. He had won a match and swiveled his chair to face me, like a dog when they did a trick right. Finally got a win tonight, he exclaimed, more for himself than for me. That's great, babe, I replied, offering an admittedly false smile. I was happy he was happy, but I can't say I was invested. He turned back to the computer and talked to his friends again. They were hyping each other up. I heard Charlie mutter, "Now that was poggers." It was such a random word that it tickled my brain when I heard it, and I couldn't help but laugh. Charlie leaned back in his chair as if he was exhausted himself as he swiveled to face me once more. I can't believe I just said that unironically. He echoed my laughter, offering a painful, adorable smile. I feel like I should wash my mouth out with soap. He repeated the word a few times, making sure to let out popping noise when mouthing the P. We both laughed it off, and he said goodnight to his friends. It was time for me to get some quality time with him, and with that my book remained on the nightstand until morning. In the morning, I woke up early and felt like I had gotten really good sleep, so I was in a good mood. And when I'm in a good mood, I make breakfast. I heard the stairs creak and figured the smell of bacon had lifted Charlie out of bed. He stumbled into the kitchen, his hair a complete mess. "That smells poggers," he groggily moaned. With mild amusement, I went to laugh. Charlie's face conveyed confusion as he stood in the kitchen, his eyes strained and mouth still slightly agape. I totally meant to say great. He continued turning his gaze to me. "God, I'm tired." He chuckled before shuffling over to help me finish up with breakfast. The rest of the day was pretty normal. We even decided to go on a little impromptu date. The best we could with the world the way it is. But when we were winding down for the night, getting ready to brush our teeth, Charlie informed me that today was poggers, babe. I politely replied that if he was trying to mess with me, it was going to get old fast. He shook his head. "It just kinda came out, sorry," he said, raising the toothbrush and dragging it across his teeth. We both brushed our teeth and in unison spit into the sink. As I was wiping my mouth, I could see Charlie leaning in for a kiss. I turned my head, but when I met him face to face, a protrude smell climbed into my nostrils. It was enough to make me recoil away from him. It was like battery acid poured over rotting roast beef. I instinctively put my hand over my nose. "Your breath is awful," I told him, which we both knew was odd. He just brushed his teeth, and it's not like he has gingivitis or anything. He went to point out as much by pointing to the sink but stopped. I followed his cue and looked into the sink where we had spit our toothpaste out. On my side of the sink, there were a few lingering bubbles. On his side of the sink, still clinging to the white porcelain, was a thick and frothy substance. It was sickly yellow with streaks of red that would suggest Charlie's dental hygiene had degraded significantly in just one night. He quickly reached over and turned the faucet on. Opening his mouth, he checked out the condition of his teeth. They looked completely fine. It took a good bit of water for the mess he had spit into the sink to budge at all. Eventually, with the convincing of steaming hot water, it disappeared. I went to say something to him, and he was captivated by his reflection, with his mouth moving ever so slightly. His lips quietly repeated the P sound over and over. I told him that we should just go to bed, and we'll make an appointment to see the dentist. Make sure something weird wasn't going on with bacteria or something. We made our way to bed and settled down for the night. With the lights turned off and the dark of a sleeping world creeping in, I closed my eyes. I don't know how long I was asleep for, but I was woken slowly by a small prodding on my shoulder. Charlie was ever so gently poking me, like a child who wants their parents to wake up on Christmas but is afraid to make them angry. I shuffled my body. Still coming out of the throes of deep sleep, my body sluggish and the blankets felt like they weighed 30 pounds. As I turned over, I reached behind me to flick on the light, and the sudden brightness momentarily stunned my vision. I started wiping my eye and was about to ask what was wrong when a very familiar and pungent smell assaulted my senses again. It was worse this time, like it had been sitting for a while. I struggled to keep my urge to vomit subdued. This was made all the more difficult when I moved to brace my new position and felt my fingers press against the sheets. As my fingers pressed down, a hot and vicious liquid rose from the divots I made. Then I saw Charlie. His face had that sticky yellow shit caked onto his face. He looked like an infant that fought hard against eating his baby formula. His mouth was moving and words were coming out, but just barely. His voice was raspy. I could tell it was painful. His body would tremble every time he started to speak. Poggers. Such a horrid sight. Watching each letter accompanied by a small spittle of disgusting liquid, and before long, I could see how it was about to get worse, as he kept going. Pogger. Poggers. Poggers. I could see thin trails of smoke lifting from inside his mouth and under his lip. Horrified, I hadn't moved my hand yet, but once the new drippings had made their way to my hand, I could feel an intense burning sensation. Charlie started to shake more violently as I finally snapped to my senses and ran to the phone. Dialing 911 as fast as I could, I heard Charlie behind me beginning to shout, "Poggers," over and over. I could just imagine the molten ooze spewing from his mouth like Yellowstone as he attempted to clear his mouth of the heat. I didn't know what to even say to the operator, so I told the lady he had severe burns and trouble breathing. Keeping the phone off the hook as the operator confirmed that an ambulance was on the way, I made my way back to Charlie. It was so much worse than I first saw. The blankets on the bed where he was facing away from me were soaked. The liquid had saturated the sheets in bed to the point that they were dripping onto the hardwood. Plumes of smoke rose from the hardwood, threatening to bore right through the floor, but it wasn't my biggest concern. I couldn't help but picture Charlie laying there all night, saying that stupid word over and over, suffering but not wanting to disturb me. He looked so weak. I don't know what the fluid was, but it was taking all the nutrients Charlie needed to function with it. The whites of his eyes were beginning to stain yellow like a smoker's walls, and his skin was so visibly dry, I thought he was going to start molting. I barely recognized the man I knew as he rose from the bed, shambling to his feet. It looked like some cheesy zombie flick with a small budget, but seeing it in person, happening to someone I loved, was so painful and scary. I started to worry about my safety as he got closer to me, the same yellow substance dropping from his slack jaw. His eyes were so different. I felt as though he couldn't even see me. He was just heading towards something. Poggers. A whisper came from his mouth. Well-formed letters unfettered by the slob dwelling in his mouth. The voice was ethereal. It didn't even sound like Charlie anymore. Before Charlie closed in, I saw the sanctity of blue and red lights flashing beyond our bedroom window. Quickly, I ran to the front door, letting paramedics in and trying to explain to them what was going on as we headed back up the stairs. Charlie looked so weak, but it took the three of them to subdue him as he fought back. His grotesque saliva burning holes into their clothing, though I don't think they noticed. They made it apparent that I wasn't allowed to go with him as they loaded him into the back of the ambulance. As they drove away, leaving me to my own devices, I could see one of the paramedics pressing a needle into Charlie's neck, and that was that. He was gone. I was left standing there all alone in the dark. Eventually, I made it back upstairs and started cleaning up the mess. Luckily, the pile of vial no longer burned on contact, though the texture was still enough to make me wince. I didn't think there was a point in washing anything, so I pulled the bed with its covers out to the alleyway and rested them against the garbage. I didn't sleep that night. Was so out of it, I almost didn't hear the phone ringing. Someone from the hospital telling me I could visit. I was there in no time. While looking at Charlie, who was pretty still heavily sedated but conscious, I asked the doctor if Charlie had said anything yet. The doctor said it would be difficult for Charlie to speak as he chewed through his tongue during his night there. Looking at my boyfriend, I could see that even under sedation, his jaw was moving up and down. His lips pursed and contorted as if trying to speak. However, with the drugs and lack of a tongue, all that came out of his mouth were small whistles of air. As I stared at Charlie, I heard something behind me. A commotion caused by another person being rushed into the ER. Turning around, I saw one of the paramedics that had helped get Charlie into the ambulance rushing down the hall. So many people were talking at once, and I'm sure I must have been the only one to hear it. The ambulance drivers speaking low under the mutter of voices and the chaos of chirping machinery. This is not poggers. My last pizza delivery shift ended in an unexpected trip to hell. I died a little inside when my boss told me I needed to take one more order out before I was allowed to go home. My shift ended at 9 p.m., which was closing time, and it just so happened I was the only delivery driver still on call Halloween night. I checked the time, and it was 8:54 p.m. Great, I muttered to myself. 6 minutes to spare and some jackass decided now would be a good time to order a pizza. I wanted to tell my boss I wanted to go home and sit out back by the bonfire with my family and eat chili, which was a tradition we did every Halloween. There was something about the brisk fall air that just felt beautifully on my skin that made me look forward to Halloween night. Next to Christmas Eve, it was my favorite night of the year. Anyways, I swallowed my pride and grabbed the pizza off the shelf and hurried out the door. As I was heading out the door, my boss threw me the keys and said, "Lock up for me, will you? I still have about an hour to take my kid out trick-or-treating. You can only do it once a year, you know? We all have things we want to do tonight, you know." I whispered to myself angrily and opened the door to head to my car. I saw tons of kids walking to the neighborhood behind my place of work, dressed up as ghosts and skeletons, screaming excitedly to get some candy that will probably last them a couple of days. Realizing those days were behind me, I threw the pizza in the passenger door and read the address on the box. 114 Smithsville Road. Where the hell is that? I have never heard of this road before, I told myself. I have been delivering pizza for 3 years in this town, and I've lived here all my life before that. My town is not big, and I know every road, path, back road, and shortcut in the entire town. I have never heard of this road before, so I put in my GPS. 12 minutes away. Awesome, I sarcastically told myself. I knew my family will wait for me to light the fire, which calmed me down, and started on down Main Street to get to the house. At least a 12-minute drive can give me some time to record some voice lines for my book into my cassette. I reassured myself while I was driving. What a time to be alive. A book written by Ryan Jameson. On a night that I should be at home for, instead of driving food to people who are too lazy to come pick it up themselves. I smacked the counter console of my car and clicked off the cassette as I got angrier, realizing I wasn't going to get anywhere in my book tonight. I just cruised the rest of the way until I got close to the house. I hadn't even realized where I've been driving, because I zoned out following the GPS. And found myself in a very unfamiliar area. I have no idea where I was, as the GPS read, 1 minute away, destination is on your left. I tucked the cassette in my jacket pocket and I turned my high beams on my car to better navigate through the darkness, and eventually rolled up on what appeared to be an endlessly tall mansion. What the? Where? Where am I? I stuttered to myself. I parked the car, grabbed my flashlight and the pizza, and started walking up the long driveway. There were fog lights on the front lawn of the house, illuminating the front of it, and I realized something. The house didn't only look endless from the car. It didn't look endless because it was endlessly tall. The mansion cut into the sky like a skyscraper, impossibly tall. Completely astonished by what I was looking at, I started to feel unsettled and uncomfortable. I couldn't explain why I felt this way in the moment, but I got a sudden urge to turn and look behind me. As I shot my head around, I realized how far I was from my car. I was so far. I couldn't even see the end of the driveway or my car. What? I said. I hadn't been walking for that long. I left my headlights on so I could see, and even shining my flashlight doesn't show where I was parked. I was completely panicked at this, so I started jogging up to the front door of the house, and I finally found myself standing at the front door, looking directly up at the mansion that shot into the heavens above. I could not believe what I was seeing, and frankly, just wanted to get out of here. I knocked on the door and left the pizza on the ground, and just made a run for my car. The order was paid for, and I didn't even care if they wanted to give me a tip. All I wanted was to get out. As I was running down the driveway, I realized I wasn't actually getting any closer to the end of the driveway. This, of course, caused me to panic and run faster and faster. I couldn't even think about what was happening because it seemed so surreal. I was in a full-on sprint at this point, starting to feel an awful feeling in the pit of my stomach. Right before I was about to stop running, I took one last step. Except this last step I took, my foot never hit the ground. Next thing I know, I'm falling down deeper and deeper into what seemed to be a hole in the ground. I was screaming and crying out in horror because my mind was so dumbfounded as to what was happening. After what seemed to be 10 minutes, I just stopped falling. I didn't feel myself hit the ground, or I didn't fall into a pit of water, but I found myself standing on a light red surface. Panicked, my eyes started to shoot around and dart from one area to the next. It didn't take me long to realize I was in line. I was standing in line, surrounded by people screaming out for mercy, praying to God, and laying on the ground crying. I have never felt this horror in my entire life. The way I felt in this moment was a feeling I didn't even know was capable for a human being. It was indescribable, and the worst I have or will ever feel. As I was trying to figure out what was going on, I heard a loud, booming voice call out from above. "Ryan, you have been ungrateful for your entire life, and have only thought about yourself. You do not deserve to see the light of day, and you will live your remaining days here." What is going on? Where am I? Who the hell was just talking? I started to hyperventilate. As I fell to the ground, I looked around to the thousands of people in front of me in line, staring back at me, laughing in unison. I started to cry right on the ground. I had no idea what was happening, and I didn't have a clue on what to do. "Am I in hell?" I screamed out into the air. The moment I yelled this, the laughing stopped at once. I slowly stood up after this happened, and yelled out again. "Well, now you want to be quiet? Am I in hell, or am I dreaming? I want ants." In the middle of the sentence, I was, what felt like, snatched up off the ground and thrown into the air. I couldn't find the effort or the air to let out a scream. Instead, I just closed my eyes and accepted that this was the end. As I started falling down again to the newly accepted fate, I stopped falling again. This time I found myself in front of a tall, metal gate. All I could hear were horrible screams that sounded like they were coming from all directions. Behind me was a room the size of a bathtub. It didn't take me long to realize that I wasn't in front of the gate. I was behind the gate, locked in. Then I heard that same booming voice call out from above me. "Ryan, You will not raise your voice or ask any more questions. You do not have to understand where you are. Just know that you are never, ever getting out." The voice started cackling a horrible laugh, which faded out over time. I fell to my knees and cried, yet again. I was exhausted and confused, and at this point, wanted to die. After crying out every last ounce of water in my body, I heard a quiet but demanding voice call out my name. "Ryan, I'm over here." I looked up and started frantically looking around the room. "I'm up here, Ryan. Put your hands up in the air and I'll pull you out." Not knowing what was happening, I wiped the tears off my face, threw my hands in the air, and immediately felt a set of hands grasp mine and rip me out from under my feet, sending me flying upwards. I was flying at an unnatural speed and was seemingly getting faster and faster. I must have passed out, because I don't remember feeling anything until I was thrown into the ground in what seemed to be a lab. I slowly picked my head up to several men draped in lab coats running towards me, who started spraying me with what looked like a fire extinguisher. I started to scream uncontrollably, and I didn't stop until I heard the same voice that I heard from inside the cage. I quickly stopped screaming and looked at the man calling my name again. "You're okay, Ryan. You're okay now. You are safe with us. You can trust us." I saw his hand reach for mine and I grabbed it again. I followed him into a room that I could only explain as an interrogation room that you'd see in movies. As he started explaining to me what the hell just happened, I finally understood where I was and what I just experienced. It's been a few months since my incident on Halloween night, and I am finally ready to explain what happened. The man that explained it to me made sure I kept it a secret, but I cannot live with myself if I don't share what happened to hopefully save someone's insanity. The man that explained everything to me was one of the special projects managers of the CIA. What he told me was that in the last 20 years, they started constructing a portal to the underworld, otherwise known as Hell. Yes, they were able to discover the existence of Hell. After a lot of botched creations, they finally created a successful portal. After the first successful mission into Hell, there was a malfunction with the portal, which caused it to explode. The explosion was covered up by the CIA, and no one ever knew about it. After this, the project was abandoned for years, until people started falling into the wormholes caused by the explosion. People who fell into these wormholes inevitably ended up in Hell. I was one of the unfortunate individuals who fell into a wormhole after they thought they destroyed the last of them. They were able to get me out because where I live, they were investigating a huge signal that was being emitted from the area of Smithsville Road, a signal that was not achievable by any machine on this earth. A signal they recognized to be the same signal their portal was emitting years and years ago. As soon as they found this signal, they rushed to their lab where their initial explosion took place and worked endless hours to get me back. I didn't understand how they actually found me, but the time I spent in Hell was equivalent to around 60 seconds time on Earth. I haven't told anyone about this experience, and I told my parents my absence when I was actually stuck in a lab was due to me having to clean the kitchen at my place of work. I wonder every day if there are more people who fall into these wormholes. There's no actual way to avoid falling in. You just have to be lucky enough to never come across one. I've always wondered who was behind the costumes. I was unfortunate enough to find out when I took my son on his first trip to Disney World. Being a single father isn't easy. I work as hard as I can to provide for my child, but I need to make enough free time to be there for him. It's a rough balance that I and many others struggle to maintain. It's so rare that I get a chance to spend the entire day with my boy, or that I get a break from the stress. So when an opportunity arises, I try my best to make it a reality. So when my son David happened to come across a contest that boasted the chance to win a family package to Disney World, I set my sights on making it happen. His glee, while he filled in the necessary information, was almost enough to make my heart melt on its own. I wasn't naive. Things like that don't happen to us. After losing her, I learned that you can't count on things to work out for you. After David submitted his form, I started to scour my work schedule for any opening I could take and still be there to provide. Earlier mornings got earlier and my workload increased tenfold. But it would all be worth it. That's what I thought anyway. The contest ran for a month and a half to give people time to send in their entries, and me time to save up for 2 tickets. I stayed up on a night I had free and printed a mock-up letter stating that David had won the contest. Stuffed it inside a white envelope and placed it ever so gently in our rusted mailbox. Then all I had to do was wait for him to come home. When I tell you this boy's whole world lit up like the 4th of July when he opened that letter, man, I hope I never forget his smile. I thought he was going to damn near rip his cheeks open, grinning that hard. We set a date, one where I could get 3 days off work I needed. Even though the trip was still a few weeks away, David was all packed and ready to go the night he received the letter. He told me all about how jealous his friends were. Never even questioned why the family pack only consisted of 2 tickets. I can't speak for all parents, but Disney World was miserable. It was far too hot, and within a few minutes of walking around in the unrelenting sun, I could feel my sweat clinging to my clothing. David wanted to see every bit of the park that he could. He would run up to every mascot. I could tell he was getting flustered with the ones that couldn't talk back. I could tell it was going to be a problem. I love the boy, but he isn't great at letting things go. I guess most children are like that. The park was so loud. My feet started to hurt as we stood for unreal amounts of time in line for one ride at a time. I wasn't there for me though. I was there to spend time with David and watch him immerse himself in all his favorite movies. Still though, despite me trying to explain the mascot's silence, he continued to protest. I would have to walk up and pull him away from the silent animals. David reached forward and grabbed onto Goofy's hand. The expression on David's face dropped and he walked back to me. His hand felt weird, he said to me. I looked up at Goofy. I didn't care. They could be as animated as they wanted, but the unmoving face always gave me the creeps. The way they can just stare forever. We didn't engage with many after David got creeped out, and I couldn't really get an explanation out of him. We still had far too many things to see anyways. We couldn't be stopping to talk to each and every make-believe character. David's mood slowly returned as we feasted on a monstrously expensive meal and went on a few more rides. We sat together as the sun had long since passed the horizon and watched the fireworks leap into the air. The brilliant spectacle of colors and booms filled the park, and despite all my complaints, there with my boy, it truly was the happiest place on earth. It would have been picture perfect if it wasn't for all the mascots that stood around us. With every glow of the various colors, their features were outlined and then they'd fade into the dark. It was eerie, and I was glad David hadn't gotten scared. Once the grand finale sent a seemingly endless stream of fireworks cascading into the sky, filling it with bright sparkling lights, I noticed the mascots had left. Then the fireworks ceased, and our only lights were the sparse placed lamps around the park. And after a bit more time of walking around, it was time for us to leave. David said he needed to use the bathroom, so we started our search, but the crowd was flowing like a river towards the exits. I was bumped on my shoulder and turned to face a man who gave me a quick apologetic glance. That was all it took for David's hand to slip loose from mine. Looking back, I noticed I was alone. My head frantically swiveled, searching through the crowd. My voice raised around the surrounding chatter as best as it could to call his name, and when I didn't hear a reply, I started pushing against the tide. My exhausted body brushed up against an ocean of others as I tried to find a clearing. My breath and my heart started to race in tandem as seconds felt like an eternity. Getting near the back of the pack, I could hear a distant and timid hello, swimming under the conversations around me. David? It was David. I looked around like a madman, and once only a few people were surrounding me, I could see under one of the lights was none other than Mickey Mouse. Of course, I thought, of course, David would want to say goodbye to Mickey if he saw him. With the crowd dissipated, I quickly jogged to the oversized rodent and noticed that David had a small collection of tears under his eyes. I promptly asked him what was wrong, and he said that Mickey won't say goodbye to him. The last thing I wanted was for David's final memory of the park to be a negative one. All he wanted was a goodbye. I stood up straight and looked the mouse in his saucer-sized black pupils, then back at my son who was wiping his cheeks. Slowly, I stepped forward and leaned in towards the mouse's ear and did my best to keep a whisper so my son couldn't hear. "Hey, I know you're not supposed to. Even if it's the worst impression, please just say goodbye." There was a moment of silence, and when I didn't receive a response, I started to pull away from Mickey. "Daddy?" David chimed in, and when I turned my head, I noticed that Goofy had closed in on us. Looking back to Mickey in the dark when I stared into his pupils, it seemed like the dark they were made of was swirling. I told David that we should get going, but he said he wanted to say goodbye and grabbed Mickey's hand. Mickey grabbed back. The grip must have been strong as David immediately started to struggle against it and screamed for me. "What the hell?" I shouted towards the rat. I reached out to grab Mickey's arm, and when my hands made contact, I understood David's previous statement. Weird was the only word I could come up with too. Whatever was under the costume was much skinnier than a person should be. The mass I grabbed onto felt like it was constantly shifting around under my hands. I wanted to leave the park, but I also wanted to give my son fond memories of it. I didn't want to get physical. I turned to look at David, but instead of being able to focus on calming him down, I noticed Goofy was walking closer to us. The illumination above us cast completely on the front of Goofy, and the costume's fabric was writhing. Like hundreds of fingers were under the costume, all pressing on the inside of it. That was enough. I'd just buy the kid some damn ice cream on the way home. "Let go, or I'm going to hit you," I warned. I was tired, but the thing under my hands didn't feel like it had any muscle to speak of. Yet it continued its dead gaze into my eyes. David's cries echoed in my head. I reeled back and threw a punch towards the cartoon's head. I thought it had come completely off, but it was just hanging off its shoulder, held together by a thin black string. A string that was moving around to pull the head back into place. Mickey's grip loosened and David was able to wriggle free. But me? I could feel two light brown arms wrapping around me. "Run to the exit, David," I exclaimed as I wrestled against the dog, trying to hold me in place. "That's enough," a sweet voice commanded, and in response, Goofy pulled away from me. I adjusted my gaze to the female voice that saved me. "Sorry, nighttime is feeding time," she spoke. I was beside myself as I looked into the face of Sleeping Beauty. The actor stood under the lamp across the path with their hands together. Mickey and Goofy stepped away from us. Mickey, now with his head back on his shoulders, stepped into the shadow. Sleeping Beauty walked forward with an unwavering smile. "We have to take care of our young, don't we?" She spoke, looking at David, but clearly addressing me. "What's your name, little guy?" David looked at me and back to Sleeping Beauty. "David," he whispered. Sleeping Beauty lowered herself to David's eye level and gave him a nice, toothy smile. "Goodbye, David," she spoke, soft and kind, with one of her hands reaching out to hold David's hand. "And good night." Raising back up to meet my stare, she continued her almost inhuman smile. "You're going to want to get that off of you." She pointed at my arm. There was what I first thought to be a strand of hair resting on my bare arm. What I thought was a hair then spread out and seemed to multiply until it was a scraggly clump, with thin strands reaching around. I felt a small prick as a number of strands seemed to try and wriggle their way into my pores. Quickly, I raised my other hand and grabbed the mass. As I pried it from my arm, the strands continued to brace into my skin. With enough effort, the tendrils were snapped loose, and I chucked the mass to the ground before it could latch onto my hand. The clump moved across the tiled road until it found Sleeping Beauty, who bent over and let it rest in her gloved hands. She nodded, and with that, I grabbed David's hand once more and pulled him towards the exit. His tears were gone, and all that was left was a satisfied grin. I offered one more look back as we got to the exit. They were all there. Each mascot we had come across that day stood in the dark, watching us leave. Our drive home was long, quick for David though. He passed out in the passenger seat, clutching one of the souvenirs we had purchased. I tried to get the images out of my head on the ride home, each stray strand of hair in the car sending me into a mild panic until the wind pouring in from the windows took it away. I think what was most disturbing to me, even as horrific as the fur mascots were, being held together by whatever the hell was inside there, was Sleeping Beauty. Her calm and collected attitude, and most unnerving, when she flashed that toothy grin to my son. The light above us perfectly bounced off those pearly whites and the black strands that were poking out from the small gaps in her teeth. David has never brought it up, despite me asking if there was anything he wanted to talk about, and he only reminisces about the positive experience of that day. I'm not sure if we'll go back, but if we do, we'll be sure to leave before closing time. It was all so wonderful in the beginning. I just got on a new job as a builder for a private contractor. This was back in the day when slasher flicks were still big in the theaters and hairspray was used by all. Me and the rest of the crew went over to the boss's house to load some supplies that was dropped off there. Normally, these would have been delivered to the job site, but the schedule was wonky. This was how I met her. Just as we were loading up the last few sheets of drywall onto the trailer, she poked her head out onto the back patio where the shadow of the overhead awning blotted out the sun and hid her in the shadow. She was wearing sunglasses too big for her face and a sun hat that flopped with each step she took. She was wearing a silky dark robe. The moment the robe hit the concrete lining the pool, I was in love. Her two-piece swimsuit could hardly contain what was underneath. She lowered herself into the pool slowly. Her chest fought against the water like a set of flotation devices. I swear, I don't think I could have drowned her if I wanted to. She was my boss's daughter. He caught me looking and approached, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Let's get back to work, eh?" His thick sausage fingers dug into my collarbone just enough to let me know. We were married later that summer and things were fine. She was the sort of girl that took care of her skin. I remember that much. Kids were in the cards for us, it seemed. She assured me it was alright. After her dad got the big C, I took over the business and things seemed to be alright in the beginning. But stress takes its toll, and the longer I worked, the rounder her bottom became. The once bulbous apple there was replaced by a pair of mushy hams. Even without children, she'd been cursed with a mom butt. Her hair, God, that lovely hair I once ran my fingers through was replaced by a weird angular bob cut. All the trips to the tanning bed made it so her skin felt like a crusted leather. The veins on her chest were a more vibrant blue than ever before, and she was quickly developing what I'll call here the waddle problem, beneath her chin. At restaurants, she would send her steak back if it was too overdone or too underdone. I used to think no steak on this green earth existed that would quill to her wrath. These days, I know different. Whenever this would happen, I would smile to the server, hoping to communicate. Please don't spit in my food. I didn't do anything. But of course, my anxiety was such that I'd pick at my food for the remainder of the night out, examining each pool of moisture on the meat to see if it looked too bubbly and white. I eventually renovated the basement as a place for me to find some respite from the overbearing woman. This didn't last long as her ever-changing interests and hobbies grew. The upstairs was no longer large enough to contain them. I stopped going down there. I didn't want to see what the screams came from. They would keep me up, rattling in my ears, so that I would cry myself to sleep. It became so that I'd walk on eggshells everywhere I went in the home, terrified of what she might do to me, as she would stomp through the house in tandem with my pondering heart. As the screams in the basement grew louder, so did my own. In the night, I'd be frozen stiff, mortified as I watched her side of the room. We slept in separate beds, but sometimes I'd wake up to the sound of grinding. I'd open my eyes and see her hunched over her bed with her back facing me. The following morning, I'd see my electric sander sitting on the floor near her bed. She would have two perfect circles beneath her eyes where she stripped her flesh to expose the red blood, the white bone, the infected tissue. This was a more permanent substitute to Rogue. I suppose she thought it went well with the doll powder blue-eyed makeup she used. I don't know. I started taking long drives after work as means to keep myself out of the house and away from her horrifying piercing eyes. It made me sick what she'd do, but I was too scared to leave. I'd find myself parking the car in some new secluded place I'd found, and stepped out to scream at the infinite night sky. Then I would return home and she would be waiting on me, question after question, locked and loaded. I would muffle something about paperwork and go to my bed. But the screams from the basement leaked into my nightmares. It was all too much. I could hardly look at my wife. She was a monster. A totally different person than I'd met all those years ago. She began wearing human skin suits, and I no longer had to wonder of the origins of those screams. With some new face, she greeted me every morning. She stocked the fridge with jars of a thick red substance. I worked in a slaughterhouse once when I was in high school. I know that smell. It's the smell that creeps up through the cracks in the floor. It's the smell coming off her breath. I can't stand it. It makes me sick. I couldn't go on living like that. After a long day at work, followed by a longer drive home, I found my way to our doorstep, not wanting to go in. I knew what I was going to do. It wouldn't be easy, but I'm sure a divorce would come as a welcome surprise. We'd both be better off for it. I felt like falling to pieces right there on the welcome mat. I wanted to run away. How long would it be before she turned those insatiable hobbies on me? My hand reached for the doorknob. I watched my hand continue to shake as I willed it to steady. My heart was pounding in my ears. Sickness welled in my chest. It burned. I was going to throw up. Before I could do anything, there she was, whipping the door open. She was decked in a full skin suit, sewn together in the places it had torn wrong. It felt like she towered over me. She did not speak, but merely grunted and put out her cupped hands to show off the newest thing she made. It was a mask. It was for me. My skin crawled. I couldn't even look at it. I tried pushing it away. She lifted the hollowed out head, skin, and slammed it over my face. I peered through the eye holes, not thinking of whatever poor bastard it had been taken from. It was a waking nightmare. The things I could only ever have dreamed of were happening. It's so hard to breathe. I take it off when she's not looking. I can't help it. The stench. I can't leave. She won't let me. Did you know almost 61% of adults are afraid of the dentist? Seriously, look it up. 61%. It makes sense if you really think about it. I mean, all those tools, the drills, the pain. It's not completely irrational. Is it really a surprise that so many people neglect their oral hygiene? Maybe I'm just trying to rationalize my own lifelong dental phobia. See, until today, I was part of that 61%. My last checkup was a little after my 8th birthday, when I bolted out the dentist's chair, crying hysterically. Oh, sure, my parents tried to make me go back over the years, but I just kicked and screamed until they finally relented. I must say, all things considered, I got off pretty lucky. I made it 23 years without needing a single root canal or filling. But then one morning, I woke up and the pain was just excruciating. I couldn't even eat a bowl of soup without grimacing. My husband told me it had been a long time coming and that it's past time I faced my fears, and blah blah blah. I said no way. A full week passed. The pain got worse and worse. My husband kept pressing the issue, his voice growing more concerned each time. I had half a mind to start a big row over it, but in the end, I had to admit, he was right. It was time to bite the bullet. He'd taken the liberty of finding a practice that specialized in treating anxious patients. I was too scared to make the call, so he did it for me. And wouldn't you know it, they'd had a last-minute cancellation and could see me right away. My husband drove us straight there. The clinic was in a 2-story brick building with 5 concrete steps leading up to its front doors. Inside, there was a long L-shaped counter along with 6 plastic chairs and a white table covered with old magazines. A receptionist with long brown hair, pulled into a tight bun, asked for my details while typing away at her computer. There was something about her voice that made me stop and look at her. Something odd. As I gave her a long, penetrating stare, she just smiled and typed. Eventually, I sighed and told myself it was just my imagination. I sat at the far end of the room, taking short, desperate inhales. My hands trembled, while I read the health ed posters pinned to the walls. My husband rubbed my back, trying to put my mind at ease. At one point, a lady in blue scrubs appeared and handed the receptionist a clipboard. Then the two of them chatted about the weather. The lady's voice had the same odd quality as the receptionist. My gut told me something wasn't right. It told me if I had any sense, I would get up, leave, and never come back. But I chalked those impulses up to nerves and picked up a magazine instead. A few minutes later, the phone rang. The receptionist said, "Okay," hung up, and told me to go through the door at the end of the hall. I stood up slowly, refusing to let my husband nudge me forward. The receptionist picked up the phone and spoke in a low voice. I heard shoes squeaking against the tiled floor, then a tall, bespectacled man appeared. He gave me an inviting smile. "I won't bite if you don't," he laughed. "Pleased to meet you. I'm Dr. Johnson. I'll be performing your checkup this afternoon. Come on in so I can take a look at you." I stood motionless. Dr. Johnson crossed the reception, touched me on the elbow, and led me into the hall. My husband came forward as if to follow us, but Dr. Johnson held out a hand. "It'll be much easier if you wait here. I know it sounds a little counterintuitive, but trust me, she is in good hands. I won Dentist of the Year last year. Even got the plaque to prove it." He laughed and nudged me in the ribs. "I got 1,000,000 of them. Are you okay with that, honey?" My husband asked. I nodded, just wanting to get the whole thing over and done as quickly as possible. Dr. Johnson led me past several open doorways, towards a room lined with white cabinets. A blue foam chair occupied the central space. He took my coat and asked me to have a seat. When I hesitated, he placed a hand on the small of my back, in a reassuring sort of gesture, and guided me towards the chair. With a deep sigh, I laid back. He gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Now there's absolutely nothing to worry about. We'll take things nice and slow. Try to take a few deep breaths." He flicked a button beside the chair, a motor whirred to life, causing me to give up a sudden yelp. "Nothing to worry about," he said, "just a chair tilting back. I should have told you to brace yourself, huh?" He laughed again. The voice in the back of my head was still screaming, "Something's wrong here." But I found Dr. Johnson's corny dad jokes disarming and dismissed the idea. "Say, ah," for me. I frowned down at my feet while he slipped on a pair of plastic gloves. He wheeled a stool beside the chair, stared at me for several seconds. "Now don't you worry. I just need to have a quick look. That's all I'm gonna do. Whenever you're ready, say ah." After a long sigh, I obliged. He prodded around with his explorer, nodding every now and then. When he tapped the left side of my mouth, I clenched my fist and distorted my face. He pulled away. "You need a filling, and not the chocolate kind." "A filling?" I asked, horrified by the sound of this. He nodded. I groaned and tried to stand, but he placed a hand on my arm. "It's absolutely nothing to be anxious about. We'll do it nice and slow. Just sit back, relax, and before you know it, it'll all be over. Sound good?" He lightly nudged my arm until I lay back. He told me to open wide, slipped a prop into my mouth, and positioned the light above my head. My heartbeat rose, forcing its way up into my temples. My palms were together in front of my stomach. "I'm gonna need you to make a little bit of space for me." He guided my hands towards the armrest. "There, much better." I dug my fingers into the foam. "Here we go. Big inhale." As I took a deep breath, he flicked another switch. Iron restraints closed around the chair like a Venus flytrap, encasing my entire body. I could barely move a muscle. I tried to speak, but the prop stifled my voice. Dr. Johnson disappeared from my field of vision. I strained my eyes to look around and saw him take a jar filled with green liquid out of one of the cabinets. With his back to me, he unscrewed the lid. He held up a pair of forceps, clicked them together twice, then thrust them into the jar. He turned around and walked towards me. At the end of the forceps, he was holding some sort of giant larva. It wriggled its top half back and forth, whipping its long antenna all around while making a hissing sound. I tried to scream, but I only managed a muffled cry. The restraints held firm, unyielding, as I fought against them. Slowly, with a wide grin plastered across his face, Dr. Johnson placed the larva over my mouth. I tried, and failed, to bite through the prop. I jerked my head from side to side. The cold metal of the restraints scraped against my flesh. The larva probed me with its antenna, tickling my lips. A giant shiver ran down my spine as the larva crawled past my tongue and down my gullet. A sickening taste of vinegar stung my nostrils and caused my eyes to well up. All I could do was thrash around feebly. My stifled scream became a twisted gurgle of fear and pain as the larva wormed its way down my esophagus. Bumps rose and fell in my throat. I felt a pinch at the back of my skull that extended all the way to the soles of my feet. The pinch became a sting. I squeezed my eyes closed and dug my nails into the armrest. Suddenly, a great calm came over me. My stomach started to tickle, and I found myself stifling a laugh. My body relaxed and I let out a long, satisfied sigh. Dr. Johnson flicked the switch again. Then the restraints slid back under the chair. I lay perfectly still. A big smile plastered across my face, while he took out his drill and worked on my filling. Sometime later, he said, "All done," and pulled off his gloves. My eyelids fluttered. Then I stretched out and yawned. I can't believe it was so painless. I pressed a hand against my neck, surprised by the change in my voice. The larva squirmed around. "That's my specialty." Dr. Johnson stepped back, took his glasses off, cleaned them on his top, and put them back on. "So be sure to book a follow-up appointment with my receptionist." He gestured towards my neck. "About 6 months should do it." "Thank you so much, doctor." I climbed out of the chair. "You're a lifesaver. I'm recommending you to all of my friends." He gave a curt nod. I crossed the room and grabbed my coat. Actually, come to think of it, it's been a while since my husband's last checkup. Maybe you can take a quick look at him since we're already here. Dr. Johnson checked his watch. "Sure, I think I can squeeze him in. My next appointment isn't until 2:30. We both laughed. Normally, I'm a really quiet person, but the pandemic hit me hard. It hit everyone hard. Like many people, I was found with a lot more time on my hands than anticipated. Sure, a lot of it was spent doing college work, but I soon found myself bored. I guess a few of my friends did as well, because after much persuasion, I found myself buying the latest horror game for VR. I knew spending money was really bad right now, but I was okay. I had a good savings built up. So when this game came up for the third time, I finally caved and bought the game and headset. The headset was like your typical VR headset. It had straps and the standard goggles that went around your head. There were no extra controllers, which I found a little odd. One of my friends, who we'll call Riley, already had the headset game combo and said it was great. With much reluctance, We also convinced our other friend, who we'll call Cameron. He was very reluctant to get the game at first. It took a bit of bribing to get him to join, but he ended up buying it as well. The first day I played the game was Halloween. I took off the day from school, silenced my phone, and set up my living room for VR playing. I sent a quick message in our group chat to make sure that the others were ready as well. While I waited for a response, I tied my hair back in a long braid and settled on the couch for some classic YouTube. Finally, both Riley and Cam confirmed they were ready. Navigating to our group chat's voice channel, I set myself up with my headset, sliding it over my head and adjusting the fit. The sound of the others joining the call echoed through the headset speakers. The screen was currently black, as we had agreed that Riley would set it up since he had the better internet. I was home due to the virus, and managed to have the night free from my family. "Can you guys hear me?" I asked tentatively, waiting for their replies. "Yes," came Cam's first, followed shortly by Riley. "Okay then, I'm ready." The black screen was getting disorienting, and I wanted to get into the game quickly. I heard Riley tap a few keys on his keyboard, and then the screen changed. We were greeted with a generic, simplistic loading screen. It displayed the game's author and company name briefly before the effect of flickering lights turned it off. "I hope you guys also turned off your lights," I muttered. "It's really dark in here." "Yeah, same here," Riley said. "I have a nightlight on, but that's about it," Cam admitted, which made me laugh. "Of course you'd have a nightlight on," I teased. "Come on, this game can't be that scary." The banter was interrupted by the main menu of the game. Riley quickly tapped a few more keys and created us a lobby, and our characters soon spawned in. We were in a truck, with Riley as the driver and myself in the passenger seat. Cam was in the back, peering through the windows. "We're in the front of the house," he observed. "How do you move again?" You kinda just do," Riley said. "It's subconscious, really. It's really quite cool, don't you think?" "Kinda weird," I admitted, testing it out by moving my arm in-game. I felt completely submerged in the game. I knew I was standing in my living room, in front of my computer, but it was as if I wasn't consciously aware of my environment outside the game. It was very disorienting, but I didn't say anything, because I didn't want to chicken out. Cam was waving a hand in front of my face. "Are you coming or what?" The passenger side of the truck was opened, and Riley was already outside holding 2 flashlights. "Sorry, just tired," I lied, carefully exiting the vehicle. Riley handed me the flashlight, which I turned off and on. Then I turned around and looked at the house before us. This map for the game had a farmhouse standing directly in front of us, off a narrow road that was blocked off by some fences. The log cabin was 2-story and had a few windows lining the front. The 3 of us hesitated on the front porch, peering in one of the windows. "Well, I'm not going first," Cam admitted. "No way." "Scaredy cat," I muttered, stepping in front and opening the door. The first thing I noticed was the sound. It was like stepping into a different world, fully submerging myself into the deep end that was this game. I lost all connection with reality, and my focus was the house in front of me. Directly in front of me was the living room. It was small, with a fireplace on the wall to the right with a big glass window centered in front. 2 flowery faded curtains lined the window, The living room looked like my grandma decorated it. A worn-looking couch surrounded by 2 wooden tables. In front of the window was a rocking chair. Exactly the kind of creepy chair you didn't want to find in any haunted house. Next to us in the door was a small foyer with a staircase leading up to the upper floor. Next to the living room was another small hallway that led off somewhere to the right. After taking in the small house, I entered cautiously. My hand brushed a light switch, which made me flinch. Recovering quickly before either of my friends noticed, I flicked the switch and light flooded the small foyer. "Let there be light," I exclaimed dramatically, flourishing my hands as if doing some kind of magic trick. Riley rolled his eyes, while Cam just laughed at my corny joke. The game was simple. We had to investigate the house, find paranormal evidence, and then we could leave. Any ghosts inside had a chance of killing us after a period, but that was fine. It was just VR. We would be able to view our friend's perspective if we died. It was just a creepy game that we could turn off at any point if we got too scared, right? I ventured forward towards the living room. In this game, each of us was equipped randomly with ghost hunting equipment. I had a camera, Cam carried an EMF reader, and Riley had a spirit box to communicate with any ghost inside. "I'll go upstairs," Riley volunteered, slowly creeping up the stairs. The distinctive old house creaks filled the silence as he advanced. Cam opened the door to the left and peered inside. "Oh, it's a kitchen. Do you think there's food?" "How can you eat food in VR?" I asked. "Well, you can try." And with that, I was left alone as he disappeared in search of virtual food. The house had been abandoned for some time. According to the game's description, the owners had just up and left. In the living room, a few magazines were scattered on the coffee table, and a blanket was thrown haphazardly on the couch. Suddenly, the light in the foyer flicked off. I let out a startled shout against my will as I once more plunged into darkness. Cam poked his head out of the kitchen, and I turned to face him. "What happened?" The light went out. I went forwards towards the lamp, pulling the string. "I think the power's out." We were each equipped with walkie-talkies in order to communicate better. I unclipped it from my belt and held the button. "Riley, the power's out. Do you know where the switch is?" "Nope. It's pitch black up here, even with a flashlight. I wonder if the ghost is up here," came his tiny response in the small radio. "Probably," I mused. "I mean, that's typical for horror games, right?" Cam had exited the kitchen and I followed him to the stairs. I shined my flashlight up the stairs, peering upwards to the landing. It was as if the light was sucked up by the infinite darkness, and I shuddered a little. "It really is dark up there," Cam said into the walkie, echoing my thoughts. I led the way up the stairs, with Cam shortly behind, and we ascended upwards. The darkness poured around us, as if the shadows themselves were a pool and we were entering it deeper. Our flashlight beams meandered left and right until they fell across Riley's form, who was posed at a closed door. "Guys," he whispered as he approached. "There's something in there." Listening quietly, I could hear it. There was quiet sobbing coming from within the room. "Well, that'll do it. There's definitely something in there," I whispered, hoisting up my video camera from around my neck. I pressed a button and it whirred to life. Then I slowly nudged the door open with my foot. The crying immediately stopped, and I immediately noticed something was wrong, because I could smell it. The god-awful scent of an old, musty room, mixed with the smell of rotten meat, hit me like a punch to the face. I backed up, bumping into Riley as I retreated from the room. "What the hell is that?" I shouted as I stumbled backwards. How is that even possible? Somewhere in the distance, I heard a door slam shut, but my brain was too preoccupied with the smell to understand what was happening. Neither replied, as we were both gagging, retreating further down the hallway until they left me alone in front of the door. I slammed it shut, following them back towards the stairs. The three of us, holding our noses and coughing from the horrific smell, raced towards the front door. Cam, who was in the lead of the mad dash to escape, suddenly stopped, causing Riley and I to run into him. "I can't open the door," he cried, pulling frantically on the now closed door. "Well, let's just take off the headsets," Riley suggested. As if on cue, the three of us reached up to take off our headsets. I could feel my fingers close around the straps, pulling them over my head, temporarily disoriented by the darkness in my living room. But instead of being in front of my computer, I was back in the truck, Riley next to me, with Cam in the back.